Welcome, everybody. Movie Boners.
Hello.
And there's a lot to get into today for a lot of different reasons.
Yes.
So let's just get into it. So we're doing Lost, a whole Lost thing. And it's been a long time since we've talked about TV, since we did our top 10 TV show episode forever ago. But Lost felt like something we had to do, not only because we're gigantic fans of it, but also September 15th of this year, 2024, will be the 20th anniversary of its premiere on ABC, which is crazy that it's been that long. And it felt significant. And there's seems to be a lot of other Lost-related things going on lately. There's a new documentary series that they're putting together, which has like a ton of the cast and crew returning to talk about it and like its effect on culture and stuff. So it's an exciting year, I think, for Lost fans.
Yeah.
To kind of revisit it.
And there's been a lot of talk of like a possible reboot or I guess reunion kind of style shows or whatever outside of just a documentary. I, for one, don't think they need a reboot. To me, it's one of those things. It's leave it as it is because it's what it needs to be.
Yeah. I think we'll definitely get into a lot of how we personally feel about it and what the maybe general audience consensus is or concerns or complaints about it have been. But I do think it's a perfect series that doesn't need to get changed or redone or added to. That would only make it worse, I think.
Yeah.
Not without its faults, but I wish that they still made shows that had 26 episode seasons and they just don't do that kind of stuff anymore. And there hasn't been a show like this on network TV, especially since, at least that I know. And I've been kind of searching. I've been needing something to scratch that lost itch.
You have
since then.
I think every year you end up mentioning I need to find a new Lost, and like I know From seemed to kind of scratch that itch for you a little bit, or at least the closest to it.
And it has the actor that plays Michael. It's a great horror mystery, and it has a lot of the mystery and intrigue that Lost had. The fourth season's about to start, actually, so that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yellowstone was kind of that, just from a general character relationship dynamic. Yellowstone's phenomenal also, but still not at the level that Lost was at. And we're going to have a lot to get into because we haven't done an episode on something so long before. And our MCU Infinity Saga episode, we had to break into two parts, and that was only like 50-something episodes of movie hours worth of content to talk about. All 6 seasons and 121 episodes of Lost, total 91 hours of content. So we got a lot to get through. Let's just get on with it. Before we do that, though, we do what we always do, which is talk about the movie draft.
Yeah, which I finally have like a big win on this.
I know. You should be so excited. You are indeed still in the lead. Dropping Groupers is at a 6.9 in the IMDb rating, and finally at 2.2 billion, almost 2.3 billion, which you're catching up to my 4.3 billion, kind of, not really.
Shut up.
But you are still leading over my 6.59 in the IMDb rating. And because you've had the Rotten Tomatoes audience difference the whole time, that gives you 2 out of the 3 categories, and you are winning still. And that's where Deadpool and Wolverine came out, right there, where your rating jumped up. And this right here is where Borderlands came out for me. And apparently Borderlands, I told you last time, I was so worried about Red 1 being a terrible movie and dropping my score. I missed the elephant in the room, which was Eli Roth's Borderlands movie, which everybody says sucks. And that screwed me over big time.
That's a big drop right there.
Yeah, it's at a 4.3 on IMDb, so that hurt a lot. The good news is Alien Romulus is better than we hoped initially, and I guess as good as we hoped most recently, that it would be at least close to the first 2 Alien movies. And people seem to like it, and it seems to be doing very well overall. It's at a 7.4 on IMDb, so that evened me out a little, but it's not enough. I really don't think Red 1 and Gladiator 2 will help, but and I just hope Beetlejuice 2 and Joker 2 and Wicked Sonic Part 1 and Sonic Part 3 and Nosferatu. You have a lot of movies coming out, and I know
do.
a lot of those will be in the 7 range, so I'm trying to not give up hope, but it's coming down tight, I think.
I was pretty excited when Deadpool topped 1 billion. I think it was like 20 days or 23 days after release.
Yeah, first time in the 3 years we've been doing this that you've had $1 billion movie.
It felt
I meant to bring that up.
Good. I was like, thank God.
Yes, very exciting for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and still at an 8.0. It hasn't gone down at all, even with all the spoilers and complaints about it just being nostalgia bait. It's still a fun time, and people are digging it, so that's good.
All right.
Let's see. What else are we doing?
Well,
I guess before we get into new stuff, I did want to ask you about one piece of movie news recently.
okay.
Have you seen the Francis Ford Coppola Megalopolis scandal that has happened?
I haven't seen the scandal. I know, like, there's been some big hype behind this movie. Well, there were sudden, like, things of, oh my God, the hype behind Francis Ford Coppola's new film is, like, massive and intriguing. And I found myself in a weird spot as a giant movie fan of being like, he's still making movies?
Right.
I was like, I didn't know there was hype to anything like
and
this.
And it looks so different from his, like, it doesn't look like The Godfather or Apocalypse Now or anything. Right. It looks like a lot of green screen stuff. And so I had very mixed feelings initially, but it does look a little cool, parts of it, and I like Adam Driver, so I was kind of into it. But you're going to like this controversy stuff, and I'm kind of glad you haven't heard about it, because you get to hear about it right now.
Yay!
So Lionsgate put out a trailer recently where it had these title cards come in, and it was title cards for The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, and the vampire movie he did. And it had Dracula, yeah, obviously. And it had overlaid on top of them text with review quotes, movie review quotes from critics, saying all these negative things about these classic movies, that, like, implying that when The Godfather came out, these critics said, "Oh, it's style over substance, and there's not much there, and that's art, like, this director is up his ass," and all this stuff. Very negative reviews, using it as, like, basically what I took from it is implying these movies are all classics and beloved. Everybody knows that. Nobody disputes that. But some critics did not like it in the beginning. So when you hear negative criticism of Megalopolis, you should discard it, and it will be a classic as well.
Okay.
So that's an interesting thing to imply. But all of those quotes were very specific about the publications that they came from and the critics that reviewed those movies. And so it didn't take very long. Pretty much immediately, Variety started to investigate those reviews, and they're like, okay, that's interesting that somebody would say that about The Godfather. And what they found was they published an article, like, right after the fact, that basically said a lot of these quotes, many of these quotes, are not real and can't be found anywhere in the reviews that they pertain to, based on the credit that the trailer itself applied to it.
Right.
And so Lionsgate pulled the trailer and basically said, whoops, we screwed up, our bad. But it gets worse, because then it turns out all of those quotes were AI generated, and they had to, like, fire the marketing team that put that trailer together. And and I'm sure that's part of the reason why it sounded so insane. Like, yes, do some people think The Godfather is not good? Of course they do, but it just felt very disingenuous that would be a real thing, and it turns out it absolutely is not a real thing, and that's pretty hilarious.
Wow. I remember, I want to say it was like early 2000s. What movie was it? Part of me wants to say it was like For the Sixth Day or something like that, that Arnold Schwarzenegger sci-fi flick. I think like it was movie, with that movie. It's a little fuzzy, but I know it was early 2000s, and I remember seeing a story about studios falsifying positive reviews and then getting caught in the act of doing that to try and drive people into the seats. And what was funny was when people realized they were false made up reviews, the movie tanked. Because people, it was like, well, if the studio has such little faith in the product itself, then why am I going to go and watch it? So I feel that kind of makes me feel the same way with this, where it's if your marketing studio feels they have to rely on AI to try and generate buzz, you kind of make me really want nothing to do with your film.
Yeah.
So,
and it's an extra nefarious thing because it was so directly credited. It was like the New York Times said this about Apocalypse Now, and or RogerEbert.com said this about this, and it was like these people could sue you for slander or whatever that actual legal term is, because you're discrediting or reducing the strength of their brand by saying that they said something that they didn't say, and which is crazy.
That is crazy. Wow.
Yeah. So, and I part of me is like, I don't know exactly what the movie's about, and so maybe it's about like a dystopian lying reality, and maybe this will actually make sense as some guerrilla marketing tactic, but right now it looks very shitty.
But right now it kind of looks like it's backfiring on them, and it's not working all that great.
And especially since Lionsgate pulled it and didn't lead into it, that's probably not what's happening.
Good job, Lionsgate. Good job.
Yeah, so that's fun. What new stuff have you seen lately?
Well, obviously I saw Deadpool and Wolverine a few times.
I was like, I know. You already told me that. Okay.
I couldn't remember if I did. It's been a while since we've recorded this.
Yeah.
To the people that are complaining that it's nostalgia bait, get over yourself. The movie was a blast. It was made for a theatrical experience. It was so much fun. It's so funny. It's so violent. And it's one of those things where I took my kid to go see it, and she didn't get all the cameos. She didn't get some of the references. But at the end of it, she's looking at me being like, that was so cool. That was so good, Dad. And I'm like, I know. So the fact that my 14-year-old daughter, who she didn't get half of the references or cameos, the fact that she was still able to see just the sincerity in this film, this buddy film that's clearly inspired by like a whole bunch of 90s and 80s buddy films. I think that's telling. That's super telling. I love every moment of it. It's so good.
I just wish that everybody on the planet had not spoiled all of the early 2000s non-MCU Marvel movie characters that are obviously in it at this point.
Once again, it brings me down to oh yeah, I did tell you this. Yeah, my rant about like people.
Yeah.
Quit trying to ruin the experience on this. Like,
and it seems like the sentiment is shifting and people are like, well, you should have seen it by now. And it's like, it's the Monday after it came out. Like, people might have a busy weekend. Right. We don't need to shout it from the rooftops, every character that's in this movie.
Like, yeah. So, stupid internet.
Anyways,
besides Deadpool, did I tell you that I saw the Bikeriders?
No.
Okay.
I almost watched the Bikeriders, so I'm curious what you thought.
So I watched the Bikeriders, and I learned something while I was watching the Bikeriders.
That's good, educational.
I learned that biker gangs might be the least interesting thing in American history to me.
Yeah.
There's just, the whole time I'm watching
Is it dull?
I was like, this is just dumb. Like, this mentality.
Like boring dumb?
I could not get into it. The acting is awesome, but the movie was dull. I could not get into the Bikeriders. And I was like, is there just something wrong with me? And so I was reading stuff about it, and it seemed like everyone was on the same page of like, acting is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I was like, yeah. So
it's been a minute since I've seen a Tom Hardy movie, and that's most of the reason why I was interested in it, because I love him.
Like, he's great in it. The acting really is good, but I don't think it's one of those movies where the acting saves the story. The story was just, and again, it could just be me because Yeah, biker gangs are so uninteresting and so...
They're not as cool as I think they are, I think is the problem.
No, it just reminds me of all the pompous, like, jackasses in high school that think they are, you know, the greatest thing to walk the earth. And it's like, you're really just a walking douche. Can you go somewhere else? So,
yeah.
And then I know I saw something else, but I forgot what it was. And then, yep, I saw Alien Romulus.
Nice.
Did you?
No.
Okay.
But I've heard a lot of spoilers about that too.
God, Jake, stay off the internet.
It's my job to be on the internet and post on our social media and stuff. And yeah, everybody's like, well, this actor is in it and this quote is in it. And it's a lot of nostalgia stuff from all of these other movies. And I'm like, why are you saying this out loud on the internet? Because they don't say what the quote is, but then they say all of the things around the quote, so you know what quote it is.
You know what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
There are some really cool things in Romulus. The practical effects with the face huggers and the xenomorphs themselves, awesome. The way that it was shot is really cool. It did feel like a good blend, which was something that the three of us had talked about. I felt it was a pretty decent blend of that.
Of Alien and Aliens.
Yeah. There were definitely some parts in it that I was like, oh no. What are we doing here? What? Stop it. Oh, stop it. Yeah.
Is it more towards the end?
The end has a bit of that to me.
That's kind of what I've heard.
Yeah. I was kind of hoping you had seen it so I could say more, but I can't. So,
well, people listening may not have either.
Oh, true. So I wouldn't have said anything anyways. People, I wouldn't have spoiled it. Don't worry.
I would have edited it out.
Yeah, it just, it was good. But the things that it did that took me kind of out of the movie was kind of a bummer to me. And then I found out, like, oh, those things are in the movie because Ridley Scott kind of was like, well, you need to have this in there. And they did. And I was like, oh, good job, Ridley. Yeah.
Flex nuts.
You fucked up your own thing here. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but it's worth the watch. It is pretty cool. It does do a lot of, like, if you've seen the whole franchise, you catch stuff from all four films that are kind of like quickly thrown in there. If you've never seen the franchise, you're not going to get any of it, except maybe one shot. And it was good, but I would say it was not what I was hoping exactly.
Yeah, not enough.
Yeah, I think in terms of the intensity, and I know like part of the marketing has been like the whole third act is like crazy intense and you're on the seat like, oh my God. I felt like the intensity in Alien Romulus doesn't even scratch like Don't Breathe. So yeah. But it was cool. I was happy with the xenomorphs. That was the best part, was like we got our xenomorphs back and they're brutal and they're cool.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah. And
that's good.
I think that was all I watched. I think.
Okay.
What about you, bud?
I have a handful, because like you said, it's been a minute since we've done this. Did I tell you that I saw The Strangers Chapter 1?
Yes.
Okay. And I wanted to turn it off constantly.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll skip that one. I watched Trap.
Okay.
M. Night Shyamalan's movie with Josh Hartnett. I almost said Josh Duhamel, and I was like, no, that's not right. And it was good? Question mark? It was good? It's the kind of thing where you kind of expect more from it, and maybe it's because it's an M. Night movie, maybe it's because they put a huge twist in the trailer, and so you're like, is there more? Is there less? What is this? Where's it going? It's not bad, but it's just not great. It feels like, though, it could be building something, like almost in a split kind of way.
Oh, okay.
And so maybe in 10 years, it will be better based on what he does next or something like that. It just feels like it's building something and it's not fully like encapsulated in this one movie, potentially. Maybe that's me wanting more from the movie than it actually gave me. But it was okay. I watched The Gift, which is a movie you recommended in our top 10 revenge movies, which is kind of a spoiler that's a revenge movie. I know. I was like, wait, why is this a revenge movie while I'm watching it?
I know. That's why I felt so bad.
It was still good. It was still great, even figuring that probably is what's going to happen. And I really, really liked it. And I really, I already like, I mean, you know that I love that guy that's
Joel,
both of those guys.
Egerton and Jason Bateman,
Joel Egerton in particular, but Jason Bateman's phenomenal. And he's, especially in this, he plays kind of a different dick in this kind of movie than he normally does. He's normally a nice, lovable dude. And so, it was really good. And you kind of don't think it's going to go as far as it does, as far as the meaning of what is happening. But I won't give anything away. It's really good. People should check it out. It's from 2015, and probably most people haven't even heard of it. So
well, I'm so glad that you watched it. I love that movie.
And speaking of movies that most people probably haven't heard about, I was talking to my neighbor the other day because he found out that I have a movie podcast, and so he's been recommending all these movies. Shout out Heath if you're listening, or if anybody, apparently he's told a bunch of people about our show. So if you're listening here because Heath told you, shout out to you too, because that's cool. He told me about this movie called Confidence from 2003, and it's like a grifter movie, kind of like The Sting or something like that, or Ocean's 11.
That sounds really, really, really familiar.
Very stylized. Stars Edward Burns, who I was like, who's Edward Burns? Because I couldn't put a face to the name.
Saving Private Ryan?
Well, the thing that as soon as I saw his face, I was like, oh, you mean the boss from 27 Dresses? That guy. Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Of course I know that guy.
All right, folks, anyway. Here's that moment where we get to appreciate how we know Edward Burns. Amazingly, Ryan, just a beloved World War II film, and 27 Dresses.
Hey, don't shit on 27 Dresses. But it has a tons of people in it. So him and Rachel Weisz and Paul Giamatti and like a bunch of other people are like con men. Luis Guzman is in it. Dustin Hoffman is like this kingpin bad guy. Andy Garcia is an FBI agent guy. Everybody that you'll know everybody's face in it. And it's just a really cool, really stylized Ocean's 11 style. Like they're trying to pull off a con, and you're along for the ride, and you're kind of getting fooled at the same time, and you can't figure out how it's going to end. And it's really well done, really, really well done. Really fun time if you like those kind of early 2000s movies, especially. It just scratched a style itch for sure. Mm-hmm. So that was really fun. And then I watched Encanto for the first time because we've been trying to watch things other than Toy Story 2. And it turns out Encanto is a really cool movie that I really liked. Okay. And it's fun to have a movie that you don't have to skip over any scary parts when you have a young kid. And there's no real villain in it at all. It's just kind of this about a magical family, and their magic is kind of running out. And this one girl that has no magical powers in the family, the only one in the family, she's kind of like the black sheep. She's trying to figure out why and help the family. And it's about the family dynamic and grandparents and kids and sisters and brothers and all this stuff. And so it's really cool. Apparently Lin-Manuel Miranda did the music for it.
He does. I think he's like permanently contracted by Disney to write their music and everything.
It's the first time I've noticed that he did any music, and I was like, well, it makes sense for one thing because he's more of that nationality.
Well, he's Latino, isn't he?
South American. I don't know what his actual country of origin is, but
and here's where Jake gets us canceled by not knowing.
He gets the style. He definitely applies it well, whatever, even if he's completely unrelated. But I will say a lot of the songs were talking way too fast, and I had no idea what anybody was saying. So I'm just kind of going with the flow and getting the gist of things. And that's probably more about me than anything because I'm an old man now, and these young kids' music is too fast for me. But I liked it. I would recommend Encanto for sure. If people are sleeping on relatively recent Disney movies, it was a quality one, I think.
I never saw it.
And
I never saw it.
It's worth it. It's worth it for sure. And then two more. There's one from this year, I think, called Arcadian with Nicolas Cage. And the kid from It, Jaden Martell.
I wanted to see this one.
Yeah. It's cool. Like, if you like kind of different, feels kind of independent, but it's like a post-apocalyptic survival monster movie.
Yeah, this was
Nicolas
this year.
Cage plays a dad. Yeah, he plays a dad of two boys, two brothers, I think twins, and they're just kind of surviving. And it starts out slow and cool, and then it gets nutty by the end and really cool and action packed. And the monsters are very interesting and very different, and have some very interesting kind of powers, I guess. So it was surprisingly interesting and cool. So if you like horror action movies, I would recommend Arcadian for sure.
All right.
And then my last one, Twisters, just came to digital recently. So I finally watched it, and I dug it. And Christy dug it.
Cool.
My wife dug it.
Cool.
She thought it was really cool, and definitely you felt like it was a worthy successor to the original Twister. It felt very similar style. It kind of brought you back to that feeling of watching the original. You're like, oh yeah, this is cool and exciting and different than most movies that you see. It's not the same as like all of those huge, big CGI disaster movies. Twister and Twisters both feel kind of more personal, but also scary and real. And I thought they did a really good job with it.
Cool.
And I like the leads. I think that I didn't remember that girl, not that girl, Daisy Edgar Jones. The second girl listed was not the lead actress in the movie, and I don't know why she was there. But Daisy Edgar Jones, she's also in Where the Crawdad Sings, which I didn't watch, but Christy liked.
That was a good movie. Really good book, too.
Okay.
Really good book.
I'll take your word for it.
I know.
But I'm becoming more and more of a fan of Glenn Powell, and he was pretty great in it, for sure.
He's, it's kind of fun seeing, like, him becoming the new it guy. I feel like we haven't really had an actor like that for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like this is definitely kind of a breakout year for him with Anyone But You and Hitman and Twisters. And now they're talking about the next Top Gun movie, and he should be in that. So it should be very exciting, I think, to see where he goes from here. He's impossibly handsome, but it's possible that he'll go kind of more of a Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt kind of route, hopefully, where he kind of just starts taking different, interesting things. And I think he could pull it off. That would be cool.
Oh, I fully think he'll pull it off. Yeah.
All right. So enough of that nonsense. Actually, a little more nonsense.
Oh.
So I was going to mention, so this is the last episode. We're recording for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not the last episode you'll hear because, as I mentioned, I screwed up the release order, and there will be a Joker deep dive, spoiler-filled deep dive in a couple of weeks from now. I think we're skipping the November 15th release of an episode. Would normally come out that day, but then whatever that next day is, the 29th or whatever, that's when the Joker episode will come out. So you'll get at least one more here. But then we're taking a little hiatus while I have a baby. Well, I watch my wife have a baby and then try to wrangle a toddler from slapping the baby and throwing toys at him. And
so terrible.
Well, you know how toddlers are.
Got to wrangle the toddler from slapping the baby.
Well, that sounds funnier when you say it like that. So yeah, we'll take a little hiatus, kind of, I guess, call it an in-between season break, but we will be back. And then if you are itching for content in the meantime, you can always check out the Movie Boners Fan Club, where we do have 4 episodes up right now. About going to be 5 soon. So we just put up a Tombstone watch along. You can watch Tombstone with us, the whole movie, and we'll talk about everything related to Tombstone and not related to Tombstone at all. And then
so a lot of Val Kilmer left there, guys.
Yeah. And then we're going to have some Halloween movie coming out in October as well. So there'll be another one out there. So if you want to get another 5 or 6 episodes out there, just get a month of the fan club, sign up and join the fun, and it will help us out, which is helpful as well. We appreciate you and love you. And there's a lot of other perks. If you want to get any sort of merch, you should just sign up for the fan club, because the cost of the fan club will basically more than pay for itself with the discount on the merch that you wanted to get, plus all of the other stuff you'll get. So
Yeah.
it's a whole thing.
You should just do it.
But we will,
because it's awesome.
we will be back, and we have a lot of other things planned, and we have a lot of fun guests planned, and we have a lot of other things going on. So hang in there. We'll still be posting stuff on Instagram and things like that. Maybe do little reviews of things that we're watching during the break.
We might have to. We'll do just some like posty reviews instead of a full recorded episode. But
otherwise, when we come back, we'll be like, "Here's the 40 movies we watched over the last month or two," and
which
that would be a whole episode.
We might still end up doing that. So
yeah, that's true. Okay, that's I think the last thing.
Cool.
So let's get into Lost. We have a lot to get into.
They weren't
I don't want to do this.
I had to pretend it.
I could tell you're a great Foley artist with your mouth noises. I don't have to spend 4 hours doing this, so I'm not sure exactly the best way to talk about Lost in a concise amount of time.
Well,
I think because it is such a character-centric show, that kind of talking about all of the characters and their respective arcs and interactions is probably one good way to do it.
True.
We can also generally talk about all the seasons, like season 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And because I think there's different main things that happen in each, as well as how people feel about each of those seasons kind of varies a little bit.
Well,
and it's impacted by other things like writing hiatuses and strikes and things. And
damn season 3.
and, yeah. Paolo and Nikki.
Yep.
And all that stuff. So where do you want to start?
Well, I just feel like you kind of like set it up at the beginning, but you failed to say one big piece of why I think Lost has always kind of been a big part, like such a big part of us is you and I. This is how we met. This is how we actually started becoming friends and getting to know each other.
Lost, there would be no movie boners.
Fan theories of what Lost was about to do and what every little snippet meant in every frame. And, did you see that Dharma logo on the bottom of the shark? Oh my God. And,
yeah, and being early 2000s, it was also, I feel like, just a special time where the internet hadn't like fully blown up as far as all the social media stuff, but they did start using it more and more, and there were a lot of in-between season hints and clues and augmented reality games going on where like that you could go on this website and click on things that you wouldn't normally click on, like the oceanicairlines.com. You could book a flight and then you would find little Easter eggs on there that would put little clips out like for you to view, and it would be like one of the little snippets from like the initiation training reel from the Pearl Station or something, and you like get some extra background that nobody else gets because they're not dorks on the internet doing that. They're just watching the show. They
also any piece of marketing, any piece of merchandising, anything that pertained to Lost was find the hidden secrets, learn the hidden meanings. And one of the things that I love the most about the whole series ended up being one of the things that a lot of people hate the most is they never answered everything. They left so much unanswered and unexplained. And I get the frustration, folks. But isn't that kind of a good thing to not have all the answers, to just...
I find most of the time that the questions are the most intriguing part, and it's kind of like magic. Like once you get the answer, it is more often less interesting than you hoped it would be.
It's never going to meet your expectations, so you might as well just enjoy it for what it is and just enjoy the mystery of it.
And I think you certainly need some answers. You still need some what happens next kind of things in order to move the story forward. But I also really enjoy all of the mystery and intrigue, and don't mind that there's unanswered questions, because you're following a bunch of people who landed on an island and crazy shit starts happening to them. It's amazing that they learned as much as they did throughout the total time they were on the island, and didn't have much more unanswered things, or like what? Why was that there? What happened to this thing? Why was there a statue there? Why are the polar bears there? Like all of this stuff. And they learned a lot, like way more than they should have, I think.
You do learn why the polar bears were there. You do learn that if you watch like the hidden episode at the end of season 6 on the DVD.
Yes, for super fans.
I don't know. I say let's just kind of like we'll freeball it.
It's interesting, I think. So as fans, well, you mentioned we got to know each other by both working at Sam's Club and pushing carts all day and not having anything to talk about. And so we just started talking about movies and Lost and things like that, and then learned that we both liked it. How did you find Lost? When did you start watching it? Did you watch it when it aired initially, or were you a couple of seasons in before you...
No, I did not see the whole first season. I remember seeing the promos for it and thinking, like, this looks like it could be weird, and I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was like it was 2004. I was in high school. I was like not really watching sitcoms at, 16 years old. And my girlfriend at the time was telling me, I specifically remember sitting in the theater. I don't remember what movie we were seeing, but they played the promo for the DVD release of season 1.
Okay.
And the promo was like the whole plane crash. You heard the monster, and I remember the preview of it ended with Charlie being like, "Guys, where are we?" And being like, "Season 1 lost." Ah. And my girlfriend freaked out, and then I found out that her and her brother were absolutely obsessed with the show, and I was like, what? Like,
news to me.
Yeah, like, what is it? Okay, that's cool. I was like, so it's about they land on an island, so it's like Survivor. Sorry, Jake, I've never watched Survivor. I'm probably not going to, but...
Oh, man, you should avoid it, because I've watched like 6 seasons already, and I've just
I don't love
it now.
And she was like, no, seriously, you have to watch the show. It's incredible. And then her brother was also like that. He ended up getting season 1 and then let me borrow it so that I could watch it and find out just how cool the show was. And I remember being like, all right, let's see what this show is. And instantly just being like, I can't stop watching. And I know I couldn't stop watching because I tried watching it on a school night, and my mom came into my room to wake me up the next day, and I was still watching season 1 of Lost and being like, I physically can't stop. Like, this is the greatest thing I've ever witnessed in my life. Holy shit. And then
I honestly feel like that's the best way, because you don't have commercials interrupting anything, and you just can get locked in that way.
It's a great way, but then season 2 finally came out, and I had that whole time where it was like between the DVD release and then season 2 was coming out to be just extra, like, what does this mean? What does that mean? Oh my God, where's it gonna go? Oh my God, oh my God. And then season 2 came out, and we watched it in real time, and kids, I feel bad for you. And maybe this is why TV on stream services fails so often. 1, there's just too much content. 2, I don't think a lot of it is that good. I just don't.
Well, I think a lot of it's rushed because there's so much. They're like, we just need more. We need more content. Whatever it is, throw it up there. Who cares?
Yeah, who cares? And no one's really diving into, at least I haven't come across a show that dives into the character development as deep as Lost does, especially in a drama. And that's my favorite thing about Lost is the characters. But watching Lost in real time with commercials and then having to go 1 full week until the next episode. And then because it's Lost, it's not just oh, next week we get another episode. It's every episode for 24, 26 episodes a season.
Mhm.
They end every one of them on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Every single episode, kind of including the finale. So
Yeah. So you can get that great ending sound effect. Yeah. And then you're like, no.
Like, oh my God. And then you spend
Yeah.
the next 3 hours pacing around your house, pacing around whatever room you're in, just being like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. What's going to happen to them now? Where's Jack had the bag pulled over his head? What's going on?
Yeah. 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 It's true. It's so I am in a similar boat. When I first found it, my cousins had just come out to visit. We'd never heard of this show ever. And they had, I think, seasons 1 and 2 on DVD at this point. And so we just started watching it. And then after the first episode or two, I was like, this is all we're doing the entire time you're here. And they're like, we're fine with that. And so we're just binging it. And it was the most incredible experience ever. And I do think, like I said, not having commercials, you can just get right into it. You can go season to season. It is kind of nice to space it out. So you but there is also so much. It's not like you watch 6 episodes and it's over. And then you watch the next season and it's 6 episodes and it's over. There's a lot, but it never feels like there's filler, really. There's not
except for
fluff
Pablo.
bottle episodes. Yeah, basically. And I think that that's great. And I think it also brings us, I think, to the physical media conversation, because we both love Lost. And I think when you love something so much, you should own it in a way that no one can take it away from you. And that's not true online. Lost just came back to Netflix in July, and people were so excited because they can watch it before the anniversary, the 20th anniversary. But then people got to the finale and they were like, there were scenes I remember that are not in the episode. And people are posting online. They're like, am I crazy? And it turns out there were 18 minutes of the finale missing. And so people were posting online, and even the co-creator Damon Lindelof chimed in on Twitter and stuff, and they were all outraged. They're like, how's this happen? What are you doing? And Netflix was like, oh, sorry about that. Here you go. We fixed it. Why would you do that? I don't understand at all.
Holy crap.
And even on in Netflix, it doesn't even make sense because they don't have commercials. But if you watch if you are
they
a fan
did it
of
to
Friends,
Friends.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're a fan of Friends, there's a great example, because if you've only ever watched it on TBS or something like that, they trim a lot just to put more commercials in.
Yep.
So if you watch it on DVD, you're like, there's a whole subplot that I didn't even know was here, or these extra jokes that I never even heard before. It's like watching deleted scenes in a show that you've loved forever. It's a crazy experience. So yeah, I think that's important, and not just to mention that Lost is going to leave Netflix at any moment, and then you won't be able to watch it again. So having that DVD, being able to share it with someone and say, hey, borrow this, give it back to me when you're done, because you'll be done with it in about 3 days. And it's just the best thing, I think.
Yeah, I do own the physical media of all 6 seasons. They have many years of wear and tear, because Lost is one of those shows I return to it about once a year. Now, I didn't for the last couple, and I don't know why, but I did not revisit it for the last couple of years. And then it wasn't even when we were really prepping for this episode, but you had mentioned dude, we're going to have to do a Lost. And, because the anniversary, and I was like, oh, Lost. Yeah, I'm kind of feeling that itch to get back into that world. And so when I sat down to let's start prepping, because I got a little mixed up. I thought we were going to watch it earlier this year, and we didn't. So I was kind of prepping for it early, and it just, for being a show that takes place in 2004, it holds up so well to me. I think, I just think the quality of it, the quality of the drama, the suspense, the intensity, the action. I'm There's something about this. I actually just got in a conversation with a coworker about TV shows because I told him, like, dude, I will take pretty much every show that I grew up watching over every show that has aired in like the last 15 years. They're just better. They're more entertaining. They seem to actually care. They seem to put some quality time into it. They don't always care about spectacle over, content. And I don't know. I think shows these days, they're lacking a lot of stuff. And I think one of the biggest things that they're lacking, and Lost really helped do this. I mean, it made you and I get to know each other on very deep levels because Lost challenged you. It wasn't just a cool show, but all of a sudden it was like forcing its audience to kind of have deep, like philosophical, theological conversations, and it was
it made you question your own nature, and you could have a existential crisis if you think about it too hard and can't find answers within yourself, for sure.
Yeah, shows don't do that anymore. They don't care about doing that. All shows seem to care about these days is how political can we be, how edgy can we be. And I just think that's a shame. I think give us shows that like the family can sit around, that friends can actually sit around and do like actual watch parties. I know trying to do it when Game of Thrones was on, that only worked if everyone was caught up on Game of Thrones. But here's a challenge for you. Game of Thrones was awesome, right? Everyone seemed to love it. How many people have actually gone back to rewatch it?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people got soured on the ending, which helps or hurts, I guess. It does the opposite of help. And it makes you feel like, should I bother?
Right.
But it's interesting. I think some people complained about the finale of Lost also. And some people are still confused, I think, about the finale of Lost also. So I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. But I do think that more people liked it or got it, or even if they didn't fully mentally understand it, the emotional resolution was there for them. And so they're like, yeah, I got what I wanted out of the show. And I'm totally fine with how it ended because I liked how it ended. And I really feel like it was the best possible end for everywhere that the story went and everywhere the characters went throughout the whole series.
I love that finale. I love that whole last season. I think it's such a underrated finale because there are a lot of people that hate it, and I'm always like, how do you hate this? The way it ties all of each character's struggle and each finally culminates for everyone. It's so beautiful, but we'll get to it. So, I love how it was set up. I love that season 1 was completely about introducing you to these characters and introducing you to the mystery of the island.
Yeah.
But it did something really smart when it came to introducing the characters was you are thrown into their lives at any given moment with all the different flashbacks, and you just kind of learn. It's weird because I tried to pinpoint timeline for a couple of characters, and you don't. You just kind of know. Like, this is after Sarah. Oh, this is after he's going to Thailand. Oh, this is...
Yeah, I think that's the best thing that made the character storytelling and the character connection with the audience so strong was that decision to dedicate an episode to each character. Yep. And so you would just start out, this is going to focus on Charlie, and you're going to see Charlie on the island, and you're going to see Charlie off the island, and you're going to get backstory, and you're going to get how that led him here or how that affected his character, like not just who he is as a person in a story, but his actual identity,
his being,
like his moral character and all of that stuff that led him to this spot. And so, and that you get a whole episode dedicated to him. And so you feel like you really know him. And then the next episode is somebody else. And Charlie's in all of that other character stuff, but it just made it it made it feel like, even though there's 20 something main characters in this show, it never feels like it's too scattered, because it's laser focused on, this is Sun's story, and then this is Jin's story. This is like, and you just get laser focused on them, so you know them so well. And then when you move on from them for 5, 6, 7, 8 episodes, and you don't get all of their kind of extra information for a while, when you come back to them, you're like, oh yeah, like I'm excited to learn more about this person, even though. And as you feel like you haven't missed anything either. You haven't been away too long. It was all well paced throughout the whole series. And I think that's just one of the best decisions that they made.
It's such an incredible decision. And I think it's such an awesome approach where they're like, okay, so we're going to have this layer of intrigue and action on the island with, there's this monster roaring in the jungle. There's this tragedy and disaster. They're gonna face, like, people are going to die on this island. Oh, and by the way, in everyone's contracts, it was stated, like, we might kill you at any moment. Just know that. You could be a heavy hitter. We might take you out kind of early. I don't know. And
and that's one of the most amazing things. Probably everybody knows this already because you've watched the DVD extras, but just the fact that Jack was not supposed to be a main character. He's just supposed to be some dude in the pilot, and he would die in the pilot. And then they're like, you're pretty good. I think we'll keep you around for the entire
There's
series.
There's something about Jack that we need to keep around, actually.
Maybe let's build a whole series around you suddenly. Yeah.
And the whole dynamic between Jack and Locke is the backbone of that show, and it's obviously the one that, like, strikes the deepest blow of, prompting discussions between people. But Locke's story, I mean, he was another one that I really connected with, and you brought up Charlie, and just, I love seeing how the show is showing you how outside in the real world, or an everyday world, like, their lives are so broken. Yeah. Every one of them. Their lives are
Every character is lost before they even come to the island.
Right. So it's kind of like they're actually lost outside the island. Coming to the island is actually a way of unifying them and bringing them together to kind of force them to actually, like, figure their shit out. Even when they really
forces
don't want
them to find resolution and find who they are. And yeah, for sure.
For all of that to be packed into the first season of the show that was already kind of breaking ground, because it was like one of the first shows that was given kind of close to, like, movie budget kind of size per episode and stuff. Like, they approached every episode as if they were making short films, and it was one of the earliest series to do this, so it's really groundbreaking on that. But it's a ballsy first season. It's a super ballsy first season.
I feel like it seems so unique, especially considering to everything else that was on TV at the time. And of course, you had HBO, you had The Wire, you had Sopranos, you had big major shows that everybody loved and was talking about. But on ABC and NBC, you had, like,
Friends was ending.
Yeah. And as far as, like, major must-see TV dramas, like, I can't really think of anything other than, like, West Wing. People liked West Wing, but I can't think of anything around that time that everybody's like, this is at this level. And I don't think anything since has been at this level. I see promos for the TV shows now. I don't think I've watched a network TV show since then, because nothing has grabbed me, and I've tried things, but it all feels so vanilla and simple, and I guess isn't taking that risk that Lost took and they hit on, and it just was a special thing.
Yeah, I know there was, like, a few series that tried to pull stuff off afterwards, similar to Lost, and they just couldn't do it. There was this one, it was, I forget the name of the show. It was like some alien show that was supposed to kind of be like Lost, but with aliens and not an island. And I was actually really excited for it. It had John Ritter's son in it.
That sounds familiar.
I can't remember what it was called. But, like, the first 3-4 episodes, it was a lot of mystery. It was pretty interesting. And then out of the blue, it felt like a desperation move because viewership wasn't as high.
Mhm.
But all of a sudden they gave away like the question. They gave away the ant. They spoiled their own show after like 4 or 5 episodes. And it just, like,
was it the event?
Yes.
Yeah, found it. Yeah, I think it only had 1 season. Yeah, 1 season, 22 episodes.
Yeah. It was like the first few episodes were really cool. It was really like intriguing and interesting and mysterious. And then all of a sudden it just felt like they got scared that, if we keep asking questions or prompting questions, people will run away. And it's like, no.
Yeah, so then they feel pressure to rush it, or they get pressure from the network to rush it. They're like, Nielsen numbers are down. We should probably do something about this.
Better do something to bring them in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lost, though, is just, it's such a unique series. I'm so glad that we got to watch it when it was fresh.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it was, so watching it on DVD and then getting caught up and then going week to week, like you were saying, it was definitely very special, especially as you get towards the end and more mysteries start being revealed, and now they're not flashbacks, they're flash forwards, and then they're not flash forwards, they're flash sideways, and you're like, what is happening?
Okay.
But before we get into the mysteries, you mentioned Locke and Jack.
Yep.
And how that man of faith, man of science thing is a huge backbone of the show for sure. But I was curious mostly, do you have a favorite character on the show?
It's Jack.
Is it?
It's Jack.
It's an easy one to say. I would say, it's funny, I would say Locke for me, but it's hard for me to commit to Locke because I really wish he was on it longer. Spoiler for Lost if you haven't watched it yet. He doesn't go the distance to the end,
right?
Like Let Jack or like the Oceanic Six or anybody like else. And so if he had made it all the way, I feel like I would be a safe Locke's the best. But I do love his journey and the whole thing, and also this struggle between believing so much and being let down by that belief, and but then also inspiring Jack to believe. I do think he also plays a major role in that. So. And then Charlie, I would sub bullet that and say Desmond is maybe my favorite.
Desmond's pretty badass. See, mine's
Desmond and his story with Penny are just perfect.
It's like, so Jack is my favorite because Lost is one of those shows that I mentioned it's a challenging show for the audiences because it does present a lot, and Lost is one of those shows that's just always challenged me on a lot. So I feel very connected to Jack in terms of constant challenge and kind of creating unrealistic expectations of himself, or, feeling like if he doesn't do this, then he's let everyone down and he can't handle it. And Jack is just a crazy relatable character for me. Now, like you, it would be like Jack, and then Locke is right there tied with Desmond. I'm with you. Desmond is, man, I love Desmond's character so freaking much. And then it'd be like Mr. Echo, and then I really love Son and Kate.
Juliet. I would put Juliet way up there because not only does she have such a tragic story, but she also bears it well.
Yeah.
Like she leans into it, and how she kind of helps Sawyer open up and their relationship when they're stuck together. You're like, this is good. This is what you should be doing. And then there's all the outside influence stuff with once Jack shows up and Kate shows up, and they're like, well, do we fall back into where we were?
It's awkward.
Or do we stay happy?
It's I really love all the characters. I mean, every character that they show, that they introduce you to and make you get to know, are incredible. I think Hurley is, what a awesome thing to have a character like Hurley where you are sympathetic towards him. You kind of like, it starts off kind of like a pity because he's such a big guy stuck on this island. So I think instantly you're like, ooh, ooh, someone's probably not going to make it very far, especially when you hear the monster for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But Hurley represents just like that childlike desperation to hold on to innocence, to hold on to something good.
Yeah. And it's also, I feel like, the power of positivity. Like, people would not have survived as long without him being there, coming up with golf course ideas, or just letting them eat all the food, or he does all of these different things that helps the group in a very different way than the way that Jack and Locke are helping the group. And I think that that's really cool.
And, when I watch Hurley on this show, there's so many moments with him where you don't stop smiling. And then when things actually get to him and kind of break him down, I mean, it's like you are just crushed every time Hurley is crushed and sad. You're just like, no, you have to build him up.
And it's so interesting to take that lovable guy and to be like, what? You also had these demons with A, winning the lottery and everybody getting mad at you and feeling isolated, and B, being in a mental hospital and feeling like you're going crazy and having some
hallucinations,
imaginary friend. Yeah. It gets very intense. And so everybody is kind of like that, where they're like, have very likable sides to them for sure. But then they are also broken, lost people that are that are not terribly proud of who they are or what they've done, and trying to come to grips with it and work it out in some weird island therapy thing.
You know who I think, and I've kind of been thinking about this over the last handful of years rewatching Lost, and especially this most recent go around. There are two characters that I'm like, these guys deserve so much more credit on this show because they seem to be such a grounding and humbling couple characters. And that's Bernard and Rose. Like, oh my God.
They're fantastic. And I love how they're just kind of slowly dripped into the show with getting to know Rose, and then knowing she has a husband somewhere and she believes he's still alive, and then finally learning out who Bernard is and that he is, and that he's okay. And then when they come back together, it's phenomenal. And then just like every once in a while, they'll just show up and you're like, you guys are just the best.
Just so
and then
awesome.
You finally start getting like their flashback episodes, and you're like, oh wow, you guys also have so much rich backstory and reason to be there.
And it's so their backstory is so endearing because it's such a lost and broken backstory, but there's so much like hope and love in it. Like they're coming from this place from something like really good intentions. It's just kind of misfiring on them for a while. And you're just like, Bernard's love for Rose is so intense. And then Rose's love for Bernard is also so intense, but it's like they're mirror images of each other. It's that kind of like example of a marriage where I think everyone is like, I hope when I'm 60, 70 years old and married, like that's what we're able to do. Like we fight and then it's such an easy way to come together and be like, all right, I won't make my sign. I'm sorry. I won't.
And also the fact that I feel like they find the most happy ending out of anybody, that they just are so content with building a house and living on the island for the rest of their lives. We don't need to get involved in your drama. We don't need to worry about smoke monsters or others or anything. Let's just live our lives in peace and retire here.
I love when they're just, because they do kind of vanish for a while. Which makes sense why they would vanish for a while. And considering the island, like,
also vanishes.
But when they come back, their quick couple scenes of them returning into the series are so, like, humbling. And you just kind of have to take that breath. Because, like, the main group are not going to stop being in chaos. That's not how this ends for them.
Mm-hmm.
But to be reminded of, like, guys, like, this is what life is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
every one of these characters is always given multiple chances to just be still. And it's amazing how none of them are able to do that for so long.
Yeah, that's one of, I think, the great things. It must have been intentional, but it doesn't seem obvious to the audience at first that stranding these people on the island is forcing them to stop what they're doing, get out of reality, out of their lives, out of their busyness, and just be stuck in a place and think about what they've done and where they're going and who they are. And some people take it better than others, and even Jack calls out Kate. He's like, "Why can't you sit still?" And,
right.
And it seems like you're running from something or whatever. And a lot of them are. A lot of them are like, I need to do this. I have to do this. It's who I am. It's what I'm wired to do, whether it's from relationships or parents or whatever, or just bad decisions. They all are kind of like that, and it is interesting to look at the series from that perspective. Then you start thinking about, why are they doing the thing? It's not just because there's a smoke monster or just because there's a transmission on the island somewhere that they need to go find. There's more of a personal like fire inside them that they just can't sit still with, it seems like.
Jack can't help but feel like he has to fix everything and anything. You've got Boone and Shannon who just don't know how to just live with each other and just be and not be so attention starved. You've got Locke who's so determined with like proving everybody that he can do anything, and you're not allowed to tell him what he can and cannot do.
And he has this miraculous second chance that he's worried will get taken away at any given moment, but he also doesn't want to squander it while he has it.
And you've got Charlie, who stranded on an island, far away from drugs. All he's got is what's left of his stash. Granted, the
Perfect
island
opportunity to get clean.
know. And granted, the island kind of like presents that temptation to him, which he fails. Spoiler.
It's a test.
But yeah, you can't help but think like, man, had he just like been able to sit still or been open and honest with like Jack or Claire right out the gate, or with Locke right out the gate, which I get addicts are, it's very difficult to be honest, but like you're literally put in a position where you're about to be forced to get clean. You're going to be forced to do this. Yeah, the island, Claire is there kind of as a like, you have to be a mom. You got to be a parent now. This is how it works.
Yeah. And when you were planning on avoiding that, of escaping that, and giving the baby up for adoption, and then Michael's kind of in the opposite case where he's wanted to be a dad but not been allowed to be, and now he's also forced to be a parent. With a kid that doesn't really want him to be his parent.
Well, and he kind of has like this misconception of fatherhood. He approaches it from a kind of a stance of like inconvenience, and that's what really bites him and Walt in the ass so much. Is Hurley even calls him out, well, not to his face, but he's like, dude, I think he hates being a dad. Like, parenthood takes a lot, and Michael.
And it's really hard when you're like, just do what I tell you, and you're not doing it. And then he just has to figure out, why is this kid
and you're like,
not listening?
Kid doesn't know you.
Yeah.
He's not going to listen to you just because you're telling him like, I'm your real dad. Like,
yeah, you just don't get that for free.
Yeah, you have to earn
respect.
You have to earn it. And Kate, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say Sun and Jin, because they're kind of they have such a great story throughout, and they're kind of like the junior Rose and Bernard, where they have a great love story that seems so pure in the beginning, but also has kind of Romeo and Juliet thing, come from different classes. Right. It's hard for them to connect, but they do it and they feel like they've beat the odds, but then start growing apart and misunderstanding each other, misassuming things about each other, and just, I guess, stop communicating with each other. And then, but they, of course, I think have a beautiful reunion of coming back to each other and
time?
And then getting torn apart.
Get like 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah. And then getting torn apart for the freighter, and then getting torn apart through time, and then it's a whole thing.
I think it's a testament of how connected people were to these characters, especially with Jin and Sun. You brought them up. Because when you see the darker parts of their marriage, at first you're like, oh, Jin's so terrible. And just as you're like really kind of siding with Jin is like, oh, you can't trust this guy. He's so like kind of verbally abusive, or at least he sounds like he is, or controlling
and things. Yeah.
Then they're like, oh, and here's Sun's backstory. Here's her having an affair. Here's her exploiting her husband's wealth. Here's her like planning on running away, not instead of handling
overbearing
the
dad that Jin is trying to make proud and be worthy of marrying his daughter, and just wants to kind of get that monkey off his back so that they can finally be happy someday. And so he overcommits.
They have like a very tarnished relationship at it's not like the beginning, but it's the first season. But man, when you start getting that backstory and you start realizing Jin's dedication to Sun is like everything he does throughout the whole series is to protect her, to help her, to get her off of the island at any and all cost. Like everything he does is protection.
Yeah, he does so many things that he would never naturally do, but he feels like it's what he has to do in order to be married to her. And he tells her that, and then she's like, well, she doesn't understand what he means by that, because she doesn't know all the things he's done for them. But it hits the audience hard for sure.
It hits the audience real hard.
And then, you mentioned Kate, and Kate is one of those, I mean, she's top 3 main characters if there are any. She's has such a kind of a similar thing where seems so nice and innocent and sweet and small, and then you're like, oh, but she's the criminal that was being marshaled on the plane, and so you're like, oh, she definitely also has a dark side. But then you learn that she's killed someone before, and when she's drinking with Sawyer, and you're like, who is this girl and what did she do? And then you start learning about what Kate did and how she got there, and it's just such a web of tragedy, and also making choices to protect her mom and all of this stuff. And she has such an interesting, like, she could be, I guess, happy or build a life that would be less lost, but just there's something inside of her that she couldn't do, that she had to do something else. And I think that's why she kind of gravitates a little bit more towards Sawyer than to Jack, because Jack is a little too clean cut, even though he's made mistakes, or his demons are more like parental, like overbearing dad, or forced into a situation, or forced to feel like you aren't good enough or can't do enough or whatever. But as opposed to being like, well, you're just disowned entirely, like Kate feels like from her mom, and Sawyer's more like that. He's just kind of on the outs with everybody all the time, always a criminal, always not part of society.
Sawyer. Oh man, I remember watching that first season and being like, I can't stand Sawyer. Couldn't stand him. And then you watch second season and you're like, he's still a dick. But there's a couple of moments where you're like, oh, I kind of feel for the guy. But then he like pulls off this long con and then calls himself the new sheriff in town, and you're like, okay, he's back to being a dick. I hate Sawyer again. And then that's like the last time that you hate Sawyer, because then all of a sudden they throw season 3 at you, and I still wonder, has there ever been a season that is so mind-boggling, intense, and disappointing at the same time, and then absolutely like shattering for viewership with what season 3 ends up doing at the end? If it wasn't for Paulo and what's her bucket, Nikki, season 3 might be the best season of Lost, but because those two have their little filler episode, it's kind of like, well, I get it. Writer strike happened, and this was what we were left with.
They had like some confusion in the first half, it seems like, and then there's a hiatus, and then they do a bunch of things to fix it. And I think the way that they fix it towards the end of the season or the second half completely redeems everything and gets it back on track. They do a very good job of saving what could have been a complete derailment.
Yeah. But before we fall too far down the season 3, there is one character.
I was going to say about Sawyer first since we're on the topic. Once you have seen the series and you rewatch it, season 1 and 2, and you're like, I get it. Like, I totally get where you are. Yeah. I didn't know your motivation. But he did. Like, the character was all there always from the beginning. And so there's so many times where he like tries to put himself out there into the group, and they like make a comment. He's like, nope, going back inside myself, gonna be a dick. Like he's just tests the waters to be a little vulnerable, and you just see it, and it's so perfectly done. I love Sawyer's character for that reason.
Sawyer is one of the top dogs. He really is. And that actor, I wish the whole cast would have been in more, I guess you could say, mainstream things, because I'm like, how this cast is not in everything to this day is incredible to me in a bad way, because I'm like, every one of them showed acting chops that are like, this is what we should be seeing all the time.
Yeah, when he showed up at the beginning of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, I was like, hey, he's going to be great in this movie. And then he dies, and I'm like, oh.
And then a minute later, he gets shot and killed. And you're like, well, that was fast. Okay. But there is one character, and season 2 starts showing, like, season 2 kind of gives you that thought process of, like, you might start getting answers. But the reality is we're going to get real, like, you're not just going to tiptoe down this rabbit hole. We're just dropping you down it, and then we're going to make it a little worse. Sorry. But season 2 introduces us to Benjamin Linus.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, I love so season 1 is perfect in the way that it leads up and, like, it ends with, we need to get to the hatch. We need to figure out what the hatch is. The hatch is this great mystery. Let's solve this mystery.
Yeah.
And then they get in there in season 2 in the beginning, and you're like, this isn't at all what I thought was going to be in here. This is amazing. And there's now way more questions of what is the Dharma Initiative, and what is this hatch for, and what's this button that you're pushing in the numbers in, and all this stuff. And and then you're like, and then there are others on the island.
Others.
And so there's this constant threat of, well, you have in the beginning, the first season, you have Ethan and all of his craziness with Claire and trying and harassing them and attacking them and trying to kill Charlie and all this stuff.
He wasn't on the plane. Oh.
Yeah, the others are obviously bad. And so when Ben shows up, or this balloon pilot that he claims to be, you're so distrusting of him, but it's played so perfectly that you're like, the way Michael Emerson plays him, you're like, this might be true. Like, it definitely might be true.
Right.
And everything that he tells you seems true and is provable because he has planned it out so perfectly. And so just the way it's written and the way it's executed, like it's at the moment where you're like, oh, I definitely believe this guy. And he's like, nope, I was wrong. You were right in the beginning. You were right that I was a bad guy, and you should have trusted your instinct because I just fucked you over.
Yeah. Michael Emerson as Benjamin Linus might be one of the biggest, like, how did he not just get every award, every recognition, everything? Because even watching it now, I'm like, if you and I had done our top 10 villains to include TV, I'm pretty sure we would both only have one TV villain in, and it would have been Ben Linus.
Yeah. Like, it's such a perfect performance. It's on the level of, like, Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Basterds. Yeah. It's like, he came out of nowhere. He should be now in everything because he's amazing.
Because he's amazing. Oh, my God. He's so freaking good.
And so cold. Like, in the way that once, like, the more you get to know him over the first, like, season 3, and how he's the leader of the others, and how he brought Juliet to the island, and the way that he holds her hostage and there.
Exploits. You're just like,
he just has his little puppet master fingers on everybody, and is unapologetic in the way that he does it as well. But you also, and you can't do anything about it because he's 10 steps ahead of you at the same time. But he's also such a little slimy dude, and you're like, how are you? How is this happening? And why can't I stop it?
It's so frustrating, and you're on edge every time he is on the screen with you because you can't trust what he's going to do. And there are so many moments with him where you're like, well, I feel like I have to trust what he's doing right now. And then he reminds you why you never trust Ben Linus when he's on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, like you want there to be redemption for him, and you're like, there has to be a heart in there somewhere. And so you still want to keep giving him second chances, and then he keeps doing something, you're like, oh, yes, of course. Shame on me for being the idiot that just believed you another time.
But they keep fooling you over and over and over again. And then there is a moment where you're like, well, I'm done giving this guy any shot. And then then you watch him do something or go through something. You're like, oh man, I should have given him a shot right there. Oh man. But yeah, rewatching it when he came on, I was like, I immediately remembered the first time watching season 2. And you spend so many weeks, or I guess now episodes. For us, it was weeks. Of just questioning and debating. Can we trust him? Is he an other? And then there's the episode where Saeed and oh my God, Charlie and it's not, I watched it like a month ago. Anyways, they're walking Ben's map and they're like, this is a spot. He's full of shit, y'all. And then Charlie's got that like, guys, why isn't it raining right here? And you look up and it's the balloon and you're just like, oh no, they beat him and tortured him for nothing.
Yeah.
But then he's under John's skin. Getting, asking him, why do you let Jack tell you what to do? What's up with that?
Jack's obviously the leader. You're obviously not the leader.
Benjamin Linus. But season 2 is really where it like officially throws down the Jack and Locke battle that becomes the whole backbone of the show. With that damn button.
Yeah. And it's the button is so great, and the stations, the introduction of the Dharma Initiative and the Pearl Station, and then you start learning there are other stations. As soon as they put in the orientation film and they watch it, and there's this strange Korean guy, I think he's Chinese, strange Chinese guy, and there's like this whole 70s thing going on, and there's missing clips like in the video, and you're like, what is happening? and there are people that have been on the island before, and you're like, maybe they're the others, what's happening? Like, there's so much that the world just gets so big so suddenly. And then I love all of that stuff. I love learning that, oh, there's an aero station, and there's like they have their own distinct purposes, and the Pearl being the one where there's a computer that you have to put numbers in, and there's a button that, and then if you don't do it every 108 minutes, the world will end.
Yeah.
And you just have to take that on faith, and that's really hard for Jack to do. He's like, this isn't real, and John's like, no, it definitely is
this
real.
Is all that
and,
matters, Jack.
Yeah, this is our destiny to have come in here to solve this or take care of this or whatever. And just, yeah, that conflict between them definitely starts there and just balloons throughout the show. But I love all that stuff. I think some of my favorite moments have to do with those little mysteries or the spreading out of the world and the stories. And like when there's that lockdown and then the black lights comes on and you see that like map on the back of the door for a minute and you're like, what is this? And you like pause it and it's like, it's DVD quality. So it's like really low resolution. You're like, can't read any of this, but I think that says something. And yeah, it's just so incredible. Now you have Blu-rays and you're like, can analyze every little detail. You can just go online and look it up now, but it was so exciting and so interesting. And there's so many things like that in the show. That's why I love it so much.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love all the hints to just how much bigger this world or this island actually is compared to what the survivors and you as the audience actually think and understand. And it did become one of those things where they have so many little things that they hint at or tease you with, and they never answer the majority of them. And you're just left to wonder like how big this is. And of course, then by the time you finish the series, you realize like the island has been around pretty much since the dawn of man. And the Dharma Initiative has been around for a very long time, even a little bit longer than what they're initially telling you. You realize like the government knew about this island and were using it to test a bomb. And
yeah, the 50s.
Like, I love that too.
So you mentioned it's hard to know kind of the timeline of is this before Sarah or after Sarah? Is this before Thailand or after Thailand? Like all of that stuff. I hinted to you that I was doing something a little different with my watch of Lost. Yeah, I've been waiting
for you to tell me how you watched this. Did you try to watch it, I guess, real world chronologically?
Yes.
What is
I didn't
wrong
try
with
to.
you?
I succeeded. I succeeded because somebody has solved that problem already. There is this website called chronologicallylost.com.
Okay.
And it's where fans have completely taken the show. It started out with the DVDs. They took the DVDs, ripped them to a computer, re-edited the whole show so that the things that happened the earliest in time, the show starts there. So it starts in way before time existed with the mother that has Jacob and the man in black.
Right.
Landing on the island, and then it goes from there with Richard being a slave on the Black Rock, and then it goes from there to the 50s and then the 70s and then the 90s and then the plane crash in 2004 and then towards the end of all of the flash forward stuff then happens and then ends at the church at the end. And so someone re-edited that. And then the Blu-rays came out and someone re-edited the Blu-rays again.
Oh my God.
So that you have a HD version, and so you can download it for free online. It's just a torrent that's about 188 gigs, and so I watched it that way. And I would not recommend it if you've never seen it before because it is weird how well it works though.
Okay,
it definitely does still work. Like the only weird thing is like sometimes in the middle of an episode, you'll start having credits because this scene was at the beginning of an original show episode. But it's easy to ignore. It's no big deal. But all of the stories, all of the scenes, all of the flashback stuff being combined into one long episode, it still works really, really well and makes a lot of sense. The only part that is complicated is the time travel stuff, because then you're like, oh, here are new characters, Sawyer and Locke and Juliet, and it's the 50s, and we're being introduced to them, but they're talking about something else, and Charlotte's nose is bleeding, and we don't know what's going on. So it really just helps add context to, like when John was born in the hospital in the 50s, right after that, Ben was born in the back of a car, and their births are actually kind of similarly chaotic and interesting parallels. Or like while Kate was getting married, this is what John was doing or what Jack was doing or whatever. And so it's a really interesting way to actually get, and it does interesting things, because there's sometimes in the show where you see the same thing from different perspectives. So an example would be when Hurley's in the mental hospital and he like puts his arm around his invisible friend and has the photo taken. You see that same scene from Libby's perspective because she's also in the mental hospital. And so it syncs it all up. So you have like a split screen where you see it happening in Hurley's perspective and the same things happening at the same time in Libby's perspective. And probably the most complex version is when they're all getting on the plane, because Hurley's running to the airport and Charlie's doing this and Son and Jin are doing this and John's getting on early and all of this stuff. So it's like syncs it all up so well. They did such a good job. Shout out to chronologicallylost.com. Go check it out because it's still up. It's still very cool. And if you're at all at Lost fan, I think it's worth watching for sure, because you get all that context and it's really, really cool.
Okay.
But yeah. And so then all of the flash sideways stuff is kind of like an epilogue after, because it's kind of separate from the actual timeline, the flash forward, flash backwards, real time stuff. So that's what I did. And I do think it really did help. It kind of really did clear up what's happening, or give you a good perception of how long they're on the island, because if they land on the island September 22nd of 2004, I think it was. And then you see that, they were on the island for 101 days until December 31st of 2004. And then they left the island, and then they go back to the island for 14 more days. And it's just, it really puts things in a more clear perspective, as opposed to be like, these guys were on the island forever. No, it's like they were on the island for like 3 months.
Yeah, it's I always forget that by the time like season 5 is concluding, and they're reminding you like it's only been 120 days technically, or 134 days or whatever. You're like, wait, oh God,
yeah. Unless you're Sawyer and Juliet and Miles. And they've been on the Dharma Initiative for like 3 years, living a very nice life.
They've kind of been there for a long time at this point.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm curious, but I was looking at that website while you were talking about it. So the way the site, at least on the phone, do you just, it says like the series, and then there's remastered, and then pushing the button.
The HD torrent link should be at the top of the homepage, and that's how you download it. You have to have like a BitTorrent download client to download it. Gotcha. You can't just download it directly, because the HD version is like 188 gigs. And it took me a couple of weeks to download it, because it was only like, I don't know, 50 meg at a time or something, but it was worth it.
Sorry. Well, we've kind of teased it or whatever, but season 3, we finally get the polar bears explained-ish. There's more mystery involving your videos, the training videos. Yeah. You're introduced to another station that seems to present the question of, was everything at the hatch just an experiment? And then they pose a question of like, well, actually, what if this was the experiment of watching and writing these journals? What if that was the experiment? Which you find out that is the experiment. The button actually was important to push. Thank you, Desmond, for turning that key. But season 3 was one of those moments for television.
Yeah.
I think it's arguably still a bigger moment than like Jon Snow dying or coming back to life in Game of Thrones or
spoiler alert.
Right. I think everyone's seen those memes at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure.
But I bring that up because whereas like that moment in Game of Thrones like went nowhere and ended up being just so pointless. But Lost presented the finale of that season with like the most disheveled Jack you've ever seen. He's got like the Moses beard, kind of. He's like addicted to OxyContin and painkillers, and he's just so distraught. And then there's like all this talk of Jeremy Bentham. And I remember watching this and just being like, who is Jeremy Bentham? Like, there's never been a hint in Jack's past to a Jeremy Bentham. Why is Jeremy Bentham so important? Why has he got him so beat up right now? And they do this whole thing so brilliantly of just like, because at this point you've watched almost 3 full seasons of Jack's backstory, and it's always tragic. He's always kind of in a mess that he has to try to fix. Rewatching it now, I laugh because they don't really hide the fact that you're in a flash forward from the get-go.
But you're just so accustomed to the style of the show that you're like, okay, this is a flashback. I'm fine with that. Let's just see what happens.
You're like, oh, it starts off with turbulence on a plane. He looks kind of like, oh, whatever. And you're like, cool. So he's never been bothered. But I thought he was bothered. Oh, well. And him sitting in his living room, he's got the map on the wall behind him. He's got like all the papers and books and stuff, and he's just sitting there drinking. The map is him trying to find the island. It's crazy. But I don't think I've experienced that kind of shock where at the very end he's like, we have to go back. And Kate walks out of the car and you just have that like, what?
Yeah. You're so confused. You're like, you knew Kate before? Like you're just trying to figure it out. Like, because you can't, your brain doesn't work that way at first. You're just you're trying to connect or like catch up to the show. Right. And then you're like, this is, we have to go back. This is a future thing. Like, I didn't know this was an option.
The flash forward. It's infamous at this point. I think everyone knows about the flash forward, which is kind of a shame for those that have never watched it and are watching it on streaming now. Cause it's like, man, you weren't there.
Man, just the sound. Like I can hear and feel Jack saying, we have to go back. And I am giving myself goosebumps by imagining it at the same time.
Because then they did their title card, which was always, it was the same title card for 6 seasons. Well, for the most part, 6 seasons. Only 2 episodes end with a different kind of title card. But you're used to the with Lost on it. But that season 3 one, even now, you mentioned like I'm still getting goosebumps. It like hits you.
Yeah. You're like, everything is different now.
Like, what do we do? They got off? How did they get off? Who? Yeah. What? Is everyone off the island?
Jeremy Bentham must be responsible for this.
And then, you're thinking, who the hell is Jeremy Bentham? And how does Kate know Jeremy Bentham?
Yeah, that season 3 finale, for that reason, is a big deal for me. And also for the Charlie death. And for the not Penny's boat scene. When the freighter shows up and they're like, oh, we're saved. This is great. Penelope Widmore sent this ship. And when you find out, or Charlie writes, not Penny's boat on his hand and sticks it on the window for Desmond to see, you're like, this is just heartbreaking for losing Charlie, one of the most beloved characters on the show, but also like terrifying for where this is going to go, or what these people are about to be subjected to, because they think one thing is happening and it's really not.
And it's, yeah, man, Charlie's death. It's so crazy because they really like, they give you almost an entire season to kind of be prepared for it.
Yeah, because Desmond has the vision.
Because Desmond keeps having the visions. And when Desmond finally does tell him, like, Charlie, you're gonna die. I keep saving you. I'm not saving Claire. I'm saving you. And you're like, oh, God, don't kill Charlie. Like, we've watched Boone get crushed by a plane. Shannon's gone because she got shot out of love. Libby's gone because she got shot out of wanting to get a fucking blanket.
Yeah.
Anna Lucia's shot because she made a terrible decision.
Echo? I think he's dead at this point.
Echo is dead at that point, which was such... I loved Mr. Echo so much. I love his backstory. I love his whole storyline of conviction. I think it's just so awesome. And I love his final scene with, like, the smoke monster pretending to be his brother. Spoiler. And him telling him, like, I have nothing to confess because I did it out of love. Everything I did was to protect Yemi, and I was sacrificing myself all this time for Yemi. I'm not sorry for it.
Yeah, taking that weight upon himself.
Yeah, I love that.
It's beautiful.
So much. And, but yeah, Charlie, the greatest hits list that he writes, you're just like... Stop pummeling my heart right now. Just stop.
Yeah, I don't know why that his death just hits different. Maybe it's because it's closer to the core group than anybody else had been at that point. That must be probably a big part of it, because it's just like you start feeling like all of those people that you have seen the most so far are vulnerable now.
Right.
And you felt they were safe until that moment.
Until that moment.
Like, oh no.
I think that's part of it. I think, for me at least, what hits me so hard about Charlie's death is he gets put through the ringer. Not just with the drug addiction, but, you know, even when he tries to mean well by, like, protecting the baby and baptizing the baby because he's misunderstanding what Echo is trying to say. He's just always finding himself in a bad spot, making a poor decision out of not thinking things through or whatever. And he finally
or
does.
Even just chance. He has this friendship with Claire and kind of starts to love her.
It's like
then she loses her memory.
There is like a romance there, and it is very fun and very cute to watch. And he's finally, like, redeemed. He has so many moments of being redeemed, and you know that him sacrificing himself is his redemption. You don't want to see that be his redemption, but you know that is the redemption. It's like the final act, the ultimate sacrifice that he's willing to do. And I think that's why it hits me so much. It's Charlie he goes for so much. He's so selfish for a lot of it, but he's always so desperate to be connected to everyone. And when he feels wronged, or if he's blaming himself for something, he totally detaches, kind of pulls a Sawyer, where he's like, well, I guess I have to lean into being this guy. I'll be the bad guy. And I do love that Sun never tells Jin that Charlie's the one that put the bag over her head. I love that, like, that's a little fact that's never actually spoken out loud.
Yeah, she forgives him for it, which is nice.
Charlie's death, the not Penny's boat. Man, when he, like, swims, and then it's that, like, actual underwater station that's not flooded. I think everyone had that moment of like, he's not gonna die! Yeah!
Yeah, exactly.
Stupid Russian one-eyed jerk.
One-eyed bastard. Yeah.
But yeah, season 3 is just, even when I watch it now, I get so excited the closer I get to that finale, because it's always just like an immediate memory of like, man, I remember watching this that first time and just jaw hitting the floor.
And in my mind, I seem to always feel like the freighter happens so much later, like end of season 4, beginning season 5, something like that.
Yeah.
Because from that point on, from when the freighter people get there, the show just doesn't stop. Like, it's just nonstop.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's just much more kinetic and rushed. Not rushed in a bad way. Just like, we need to go places. Things are happening. People are dying for the next 3 seasons. So for that to be the middle of the show, and also for the flashbacks to kind of be done, and now they're all flashing forward, is an interesting thing. That is like the middle of the show, we stop looking back and now we're looking forward at when we get off the island and what happens, and you're like, you're kind of going the same direction, which is interesting. Like, the people on the island are going towards the point where they're going to get off, but then you're also seeing way in advance after they've been off and they're trying to go back. And it's just, it's so interesting. And I love how it's all organized.
Yeah. Yeah, season 4, I remember being so, like, ready for season 4, because I was so excited to see whose boat was it. Let's fight, like, man, the whole series is going to start off with, like, a big mourning in memoriam for Charlie, and you get, like, a couple tears on the beach, and it is time to move.
Yeah.
And, which I know some people, like, always kind of hated that, but it makes sense for the show, because they're in such a, like you said, like, we have to move because everything just went into motion. Everything is happening. And now the stakes are even higher, because you as the audience and Desmond know, like, nope, we fucked up. We made a mistake. Something's wrong. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Season 4, introducing Jacob, or the mystery of Jacob, and Ben talking about how they have a leader that's not him, that he basically answers to, and taking John to see him in this mysterious cabin. That's also like a standout scene in my memory that I'll just never ever forget my entire life, is when they like are there, and Ben's like gesturing, is like, what do you mean? It's not an empty chair. He's right there. And then it like turns and you see like a silhouette, and it's just was like chilling.
Oh,
like you're like, I didn't know this was a horror show all of a sudden. Like, and then like that cabin starts to like move, and like Hurley sees it, and it for a while it doesn't come back. And there are some times in the show where like something will happen, and whether it's like the map on the back of the door or the cabin being in the dark or whatever, something will happen and then nobody talks about it. And I'm like, was I crazy? Like, did that really happen? Are they going to bring it back? Was that important? Was that just a crazy thing? And it generally always does. They do a good job of not leaving too many threads hanging, I think. But that was one of those where I was like, that was the scariest and most interesting thing I've ever seen. Why are we not talking about that all the time now? Like,
well, John is in a ditch for a little while, so yeah, I'm with you. That first time watching that episode, you're already kind of on edge, just because the setting, you know, it's this tiny cabin, it's in the woods, and if you're a horror fan, you're like, nothing good happens in a cabin in the woods. Like, and yeah, it's the empty chair. And Ben's like, what are you talking about? Jacob's sitting right here. Don't bring your flashlight. No technology. It's lamplight only. And when John is like walking out and you hear the help me, you're like,
I don't like that.
And yeah, John flashes the light. The look on Ben's face is so sincere. That you are immediately like, John, stop doing what you're doing. Like, run, man, run. And yeah, the silhouette sitting in the chair after everything's going around. I'm with you. I remember just being like, nope, nuh-uh. I don't want to see any chair in a moonlit room ever, just in case a figure ends up sitting there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, like, they don't come back to the cabin for quite a while. And when they do, you're like, wait a minute, that's not the silhouette that I saw sitting in the chair. And then for me, at least, I thought I was crazy because I was like, I thought the dude had like a beard or was looking different. And
Yeah.
why is...
Yeah, you don't see much, but you still put some image in your mind of like what that person must have been like.
And then you're like, why is Jack's dad always around, and why is he trying to talk to everyone? And but that comes later. But that was one of those moments too, Jake, that I mentioned earlier about Ben, when you're like, okay, like I feel like we just heard Jacob and saw the silhouette in the chair, so maybe Ben actually wasn't putting on a show. Maybe we have to trust Ben. And then Ben takes him to show John the Dharma Initiative, and you're like, oh shit, they're all dead in a pit. And then Ben shoots Locke, and I remember being like, there's no way they're gonna kill Locke like this. And then you're thinking like, it would make perfect sense for this show to be like, okay, Locke, goodbye. Like,
yeah, it's entirely possible, and you are just uneasy. That's part of like the kinetic nature of the rest of the seasons. I feel like is like people are dying, main characters are dying, new people are showing up that are very interesting, but you don't know if you have enough time with them because it just feels like everything's moving so fast.
And a couple of them you don't, and
it's also introduces the time travel with the wheel in the underground wheel in season 4.
Yeah,
that's like giant frozen tundra, and then Ben gets transported like to the desert through it. So like it's like time travel, but also space travel. It's just things are nuts, and I think that might be a complaint of the show is that it starts out as like a very pretty normal character drama with some smoke monsters on the island, and then I think as time goes on, it gets more. It's less of broad of a show, and so either you're invested at this point and you like this kind of thing, or some people may have been turned off by like, well, guess what? You're in a sci-fi show now. Bet you didn't know that,
right?
And you're going to be dealing with time travel and all of this stuff. And lucky for me, I love that stuff, and I'm like, give me more of that. And I was into, like I said, all of the online clue stuff. And if anybody's ever been in that, you know about the Sri Lanka video that was online about how Alvar Hanso from the original Dharma Initiative that like founded it, he talks about like the numbers and the Valenzetti equation, and that's where that's first introduced, and those numbers are like part of the constants or equation that is intended to help them crack time travel, basically, or just the time space-time continuum, I guess, something like that. And so it's just such a fascinating thing, but not overly done. Like it's not like it gets super confusing. It is still very character focused, and you are stuck with all of these people in the 70s with the Dharma Initiative and stuff. And like, so it I don't know. It's just, it starts to get more complicated, it feels like, but it's also still very much the show that you know and love at the same time.
I remember thinking that it was weird. Like the moment, because season 4 is pretty intense for the most part, with the flash forwards of, like you said, kind of that parallel, you know, the flash forwards are actually them trying to get back, or trying to convince everyone to get back. And also for the first handful of episodes, you're trying to figure out who the hell the Oceanic Six is. So you're like, who made it? Because not everyone made it. And they're trying to
and you're like, is it because everybody else died?
Or like, what's happening here? And then like on the island, they're trying to figure out what like Miles and the team are actually on the island for, which you're always
all the freighter people
questioning what's going on. You've got Martin Keamy, who at first you're like, oh, he's just the military guy, but then you find out that he's actually kind of on a whole different mission. And by the way, I love that actor. He's so good.
Yeah.
And
he's so good.
There's so much in season 4 that you're like, holy crap, holy crap, holy crap. And then Ben tells Locke, I'm going to move the island, and then I'm basically banned. You're never going to see me again. I'm banned from the island the moment I move it. And you're like, move the island?
Yeah. Of all the things I thought were options, that was not
that
one
wasn't
of them.
even in the realm of thought. All right. Like,
Yeah.
I've totally been okay with Miles talking to the dead. I'm okay with the smoke monster. I'm okay with all these different stations with weird things going on. I'm okay with...
Yeah. Daniel Faraday's crazy physicist mess.
I'm okay with this stuff. I'm okay with the fact that you showed me one of the polar bears with the Dharma collar in the middle of Saudi Arabia trying to figure out, well, how did it get there? But I'm all right with what the show's going to do. And then it tells you it's moving the island. And I remember being like, you're either all in right now and you're just for the rest of the ride, or you haven't actually been watching the show. Like, then you're not actually invested in the show. And I remember just being like, let's see what they're going to do. This is so weird. But let's see what it is. And then it's moving the island, and you're like, this is such an intense finale, and like, it's emotional with the boat and with Martini, and the moment they killed Alex, I was like, what are we just like the show in season 4, it felt like they knew, the writers knew they were getting close to the finale, like concluding the story. So it was time to kind of like rapid fire in a way, like they're not central, they're not central, they're not central, they're not central. And you're like, this is a lot of people, folks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of, like I mentioned, the show seems like it speeds up, even though it still has half the show left, may have something to do with the fact that I think it was at season 3, after they did the hiatus and fixed all of the issues that they were having, they announced that the show would end after 3 more seasons. So they knew at that point it was definitely 6 seasons. And then I think the audiences had confidence that, okay, they know what this is, they know where it's going, they know where it's ending. And so now it feels like, let's just do all these things that we need to do in order to get there. And it doesn't feel rushed in a bad way. It just feels like there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen.
There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. And I think what's funny is the writers, they all knew where they were going, which was going to be a crazy ride. And the audience was expecting the last 3 seasons to be answer, right? Like, we're just answering everything. Season 4 doesn't answer shit. Season 5 comes along.
Adds more questions. You're like, why can you move the island? Who's Jacob? Who is this dead guy that Jack feels sort of like a responsibility
right, and
to?
you don't find out who Jeremy Bentham is until like almost near the end of the season. And you're like, it was Locke? Yeah. Wait a minute, how is Locke off the island? And then season 4 presented a lot of new questions with not a lot of answers, which is very like, that's on brand. Then season 5 comes along, and I remember when they were like instantly telling you about the time travel and showing you time travel, just me thinking like, I feel like there's way more questions that they're about to not answer, and sure as shit, there were a lot more answers.
It's like, what if we went to the 1800s and you saw the Black Rock crash on the island? And what happens if we go to the 50s or the 70s and you see Rousseau end up on the island and she's pregnant, and you're like, all of this stuff is happening and it's so crazy.
And it's the Richard. I feel like Richard's role in the show was finally cemented in season 5, where he becomes prominent. Like, you've seen him a handful of times. There's been a couple little interactions with him, but now it's full on, oh, Richard Alpert is, like, important. And Richard Alpert is visiting John when he's a child. What?
And looks the same
and
age.
He looks the same age. And you're like, wait. Richard Alpert comes up to John after he's been shot and tells him, like, John, you're going to have to die. And you're like, how does Richard know this? What's going on? And then his answer, because as you're asking that, John is asking him, how do you know that? And he tells him, because you told me, John. And your brain is like, the fuck is happening?
Yeah, and you see a young Charles Widmore being on the island, and you see Daniel Faraday's mom being on the island, and young Charlotte born on the island, young Miles on the island, and you're like, all of these people are so connected.
Everyone's connected. Oh my God. Jake. All right. We have to backtrack just a little bit, because if there's an episode that needs to be just celebrated, because it's one of the most intense episodes, is the Constant from season 4.
Yeah. When I think of Desmond, that's most of the episode I think of.
That episode is so stressful. Even watching it now, knowing, like, it's okay. It's so stressful to watch. And I think it's so cool because I feel like in season 4, every season seems to have that one episode that everyone unanimously is always like, yep, that's the episode. That's the heart of that season. The Constant for Desmond, I feel, is that one for everyone. Him using Penny as, like, the connection the whole time. You're like, please don't kill Desmond. Please don't kill Desmond. Like, not like this. Please, not like this.
I'm not ready for that.
Right? I don't think I could handle if Desmond would have died. Spoiler.
Well, that's very bright.
I almost did. Sorry.
Leave.
Yeah. Well, I bumped my mouse and it hit something, and I was like, oh, get rid of that screen. And then anyways. Yeah, that Constant episode where you meet, oh my God, who's the other dude on the ship? Daniel
Faraday?
No. The communications officer on the ship. Charles Wachowski or whatever.
Yeah.
I recognize that guy, and I can never remember where I know him from. He's one of those kinds of actors. I think he was in, like, Short Circuit.
I think you're right.
I feel like that's right. Kids, Short Circuit is a movies from the 80s about a lovable robot.
He's the guy that plays the Indian guy, right? Fisher Stevens?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, he's great.
How wonderful is it in that episode when, like, Desmond and Penny finally do connect when he calls her on Christmas, and you're just like, the phone call's so short, but it's so, like, endearing, and you get goosebumps. I get goosebumps still, just how it's edited and put together. You're like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, he's been waiting to reconnect with her for years after being stuck on this island.
It's freaking island. So anyways, back to time travel.
Yeah, season 5 is intense because it's not just everybody that got stuck in the past. So all the island has been skipping through time and space, it seems like, not just time, but time and space. It is moving and also going backwards through time. Eventually stops. People get trapped in the 70s. And some of the people that left the island, the Oceanic Six, do come back. Or they all come back, but only some go back in time to the 70s, and some are stuck in present time. What's the Ajira Airways?
The Ajira flight.
And Locke's dead body, who's no longer dead, is now on the island again. And that whole part I love so much, but you also know, like, that's not really John. Like, there's hints. There's so many little hints. You're like, that's not really Locke, or what he would do, or what he would say or feel in those moments. And so there's it's possible that he changed. There's so much time has passed, and obviously Jack's changed a lot as well. So you're like, well, maybe it is, but something in your gut tells you it's not.
Well, the first time watching season 5, and yeah, John's alive, and you're like, ooh, he definitely got murdered and died. Like, we watched that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking kind of like Pet Sematary scenario of like, oh, the island brought him back to life, but no, sometimes dead is better. Like, this might be, and the way he behaves, you're like, yeah, something feels corrupted here. Something doesn't feel Locke-esque.
And the context you have is Jack's dad.
Yeah.
And how he was dead at the original crash, and then starts showing up all over the place, walking around, may have the ability to disappear or not really be there, or you don't know what the deal is. And so you're like, I don't think you're like normally alive. Like there's something else for sure.
Something
Best
is
case scenario
off, but you're just not sure what it is. The way he behaves with everyone, where it's like that, he's very inviting. He has this guise of being so open with his people and with the others, and what his intentions are, and the whole time though you're like, this is just, it feels so not, I guess you could say, righteous, like John always strives to be. And then it always throws me off with like how Sun is with Locke and Lapidus, which, by the way, Lapidus is probably also on my list of favorite characters because he's so awesome.
Yeah, and I love that actor. He's great.
But I always like find myself getting a little mixed up every time I watch it. My brain is like, oh, what is when they get split? You know, Jack, Kate, and Hurley go to the 70s, and then Jen, Lapidus, I'm forgetting someone, and Saeed go to present time. Like, they stay in present time. My brain is always like, what? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It continues to stretch what you are able to comprehend, I think, which is part of the fun of the show, at least in my mind. It's not just the mysteries themselves, but just the format of the show is kind of a riddle, and so you feel successful understanding it and figuring it out as it goes along.
Man, that's when we get that incredible Sawyer storyline, where at this point you've like joined Team Sawyer. You're on his side, even when he's an ass. But season 5, I'm like, this is Sawyer's season. He's taken initiative. He's like a leader in the Dharma. I mean, he heads the security team, which is funny. And he's got Juliet. And I don't know how they pulled this off, because the interaction between Sawyer and Juliet in like season 4, and then the first couple episodes of season 5, before you learn, you're like, you get that they will be companions, but you're kind of like, all right, cool, they'll be good for each other, I guess. But then you find out that they're actually a couple, and you're like instantly excited and on board, and just like, this is a better romance than Jack and Kate. Yes, like, this is what we've been wanting. It really is.
Yeah, there's just been this weird love square between Jack and Kate, and Jack and Juliet, and Sawyer and Kate, and now Sawyer and Juliet, and the animosity between Jack and Sawyer. And so it just settles, and it feels right. And part of that is that it feels like Sawyer has found his place and has able to kind of blossom in the absence of Jack's overbearing leadership and Locke's overbearing whatever it is he was doing. And now Sawyer can just kind of be that guy, and I think it also comes at the right time. Like, if that happened, if he was at the beginning when they first landed on the island and Jack and Locke weren't there, he wouldn't have been the leader. He was too much of the introspective con man, manipulative douchebag guy.
When he's with Juliet in the Dharma Initiative, he really does. I mean, he even looks just healthy. Like, he looks happy. The way they costumed him up, the makeup and stuff, he just looks settled in a good way. Like he's actually living an honest life, even though he's lying about who he is, like his name. But there's a sincerity with him, and it's just, you're so proud of him. And you're so happy for Juliet because she's like found peace and staying for, what was supposed to only be 2 weeks with Sawyer, and now it's 3 years, and they have like a whole life together. It's just, I love that. And you totally, the moment Jack and Kate show up, you're just like, oh man.
Yeah. You feel how awkward it is. And you also feel like, I feel for Sawyer like there's some sort of pressure to revert back to who they remember him as, even though he's grown so much. And that feels so sincere to me. Like, that feels like such a real life thing, that I have changed so much as who I am, and these people that I knew so long ago assume that they still know me, and you feel that pressure to kind of fall back into being that person, because it's kind of easier than being honest and transparent about
showing them
who you really are
now. Yeah.
All the growth you've experienced. Like, it's such an interesting thing, and it feels so true in the show.
And they waste. It cracks me up, especially on this most recent rewatch. It cracks me up because when Jack shows up back in the 70s, he kind of like has that inner battle to try to be like instantly gung-ho about figuring stuff out. But then Sawyer kind of like tells him to sit down and just like, dude, there's literally nothing for you to fix right now. So just sit back and let me think.
Yeah. And like, this is my show. I have a life here.
Right.
We know what we're doing. These people trust me. You can't just go around screwing it up.
Like, you gotta think. And I love that Jack kind of does try to take Sawyer's like word for it. Like, okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'm sitting back.
I think it's part of his healing in a way that he has to let go of control, which is so hard for him to do.
So hard to do.
And it's weird to see him like that also, because he kind of doesn't know what to do with himself. But it's so necessary, I think.
Super necessary. And I like seeing him kind of like take that step back. And just when you're like, oh, like, all right, this is where I think like maybe we settle, because like we're stuck in the 70s now. So so maybe the danger isn't as horrible. And then Saeed shows up and you're like, oh crap. Because at this point you're like, Saeed is like a hitman for Ben. And then Kate can't help herself. She instantly, just like Jack, kind of has to like, well, what are we doing? Well, what's going on? And it's like, Kate, you're fucking this all up. And then she really fucks it all up. And then Saeed really, really, really fucks everything up. Like, it was so peaceful for like 3 episodes. Ish.
Yeah. And it's, you're on Sawyer and Juliet's side, really, when they're like, maybe we just leave. Like, we don't need to be involved in this. We have a life. We're fine. Let's just move on. We don't need to help these people.
But Sawyer just had to glance at Kate. I never take it
unresolved.
Yeah, I never take it that he still like loves her. I think it's exactly what you said, Jake, where he's like got this unrealistic pressure expectation to revert back to what they remember him as. And I think that's ultimately what Juliet is the most disappointed in, is that he does it.
She is such a phenomenal actress because you see on her face as she's seeing the little glances that Sawyer has, that he is having thoughts or memories or something, and it definitely makes her feel like what I thought we had isn't completely there. Like there's still something left over for Kate, and that's disappointing for sure.
Yeah, and you as the audience, you see it, you feel it immediately, and you're also just like, oh, damn it, Sawyer. Just had to look at Kate. You were on the submarine. You were leaving. You were free. Like,
right.
It was no longer your fight. Of course, you could argue that Jacob wasn't going to let him leave yet, but...
Yeah, and I guess that's most of what's left to talk about is the actual purpose of the island and the heart of the island.
To do that, though, you gotta talk that finale, because that finale is also so intense, and the stakes are so high with Saeed being shot and dying. Jack is like hyper convinced that dropping this nuclear core, detonating this nuclear core in the heart of the island is going to, well, not the heart of the island, but dropping it into that pocket of energy is going to reset the entire thing. And I love the stakes that they try to tell Jack about, of like, you do this, that means like none of them meet. That means the plane lands in LA, Kate goes to prison, Sawyer probably ends up in prison or dead, never meets Juliet. Yeah. Juliet stays on the island with Ben. You know, Locke survives, but he's stuck in his wheelchair and alone. Like, the stakes are everyone returns being broken. Like, nothing actually... The circumstance changes, but the reality doesn't.
It's like, I get everything that has happened to you on the island has not been peaches and roses, but is what you came from before that really all that much better?
Like, is it really better? Is it?
And for Jack it is, because he had Kate, he had a romance with her, and he couldn't maintain it. He feels like it wasn't enough. He feels like he screwed it up, and the pain of knowing that he couldn't succeed at that is he feels it's better to not have ever met her.
I've always kind of taken it not just with Kate. I feel like everyone that he wasn't able to save or fix on the island.
True.
I think it gives him a chance to escape all of that pain.
I think he's still haunted by Boone's death. Still, like, feels like he should have done more for all of these people. So maybe if just making them still alive, that would be enough.
Yeah, because, I mean, he even says, like, everyone shows up alive in LA, and I think it's just Jack being like, I can't take anything more. This, this is better if everyone just stays alive. Juliet going down there, Sawyer's breakdown of, like, don't you let go, don't you do it. I'm like, oh, fuck. And that was when Lost gave us, like, the new ending title card of the white screen instead of the black one.
Yeah.
And I remember just feeling so daunting, because you knew at that point, like, there's only one more season. They haven't answered shit, which means I remember us talking about this and being like, oh my God, every episode is just going to be like an onslaught of answers and figuring out if the plan worked, if detonating the bomb worked. And then we got one answer and a couple more sprinkled through, and then some more questions. But
yeah, you start getting these flash sideways, which seem like it worked, because everybody's on, like, the plane lands and people don't know each other, but they're also different they have different interactions, or
Mm-hmm.
Sawyer is a cop now, and there's like everything is kind of different in different ways, which is weird.
Everything's a little off. It's a little weird. And you're trying to figure out like, oh, did the bomb like create an alternate reality? Because that at this point you're like, that's on brand. That would fit. We've had time travel. We've had an island move. Like this would fit. This would totally fit. But then they take you back to the island and you find out that the bomb went off, but it didn't do what they thought. It just put them all in the same time period.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess the one big thing that we forgot to mention is Locke's plan with Jacob. And when you find out that Locke is in fact still dead and it's the smoke monster that is masquerading as Locke.
Yeah, and intends to kill Jacob.
And you finally meet Jacob. And you're like, I know that guy. I like this actor. And then he dies in the same episode. And you're like, wait.
Yeah.
Like, there's been a lot of Jacob talk. And he's gone pretty much as soon as we met him. What is this?
Yeah, it makes you very concerned for sure. But then he starts popping up in different flashbacks or visions of the main characters' lives. Like he seems to have known them since Kate was a kid, or since Locke jumped out the window, or was pushed out the window and got injured, crippled, and he's been there at all of these major formative moments of their lives. And so that is very interesting. And you're like, are you shepherding them? Like, are you helping them? Or why is this happening?
Yeah, and every time he's interacted with them, he always has like a physical touch somehow with them. You know, from like full, very obvious with Jin and Sun where he holds their shoulders together, or, you know, grabbing Locke's foot, or the super subtle one is with Sawyer and the pen that he hands him when he's a kid. He like grazes his hand. It's very interesting because you definitely get that sense of like, oh, so Locke has been right, or was right the whole time. Like there is a reason they are on the island. This was their destiny.
They were brought to the island.
Yeah. And then season 6 kicks off, and all the oddities, the differences, and then you're back on the island with them finding the temple, and you're like, how much of this island is undiscovered for us? And I feel like there's probably still so much more on the island if it hadn't been 6 seasons. But the final season is so interesting to me because there are episodes that feel kind of like a history lesson, you know, with like Richard or Jacob's lineage, his childhood and stuff, and the Man in Black himself. It's just, season 6 is such an odd season to me, but it's like a hyper emotional season because every character in this alternate reality or version, they're like living these mirrored lives where they still struggle, they're still kind of broken, but it's like there's little pockets of redemption and peace, and that's the ultimate, like, how do we actually, instead of just a pocket, have that be the full thing? So they're still searching. There's parts of it where it seems like they have the thing that they were missing before, that they're less broken than they were, or they have the relationship or the healing or the just presentness of a parent or of a job or whatever it is that they didn't have to be hurt by or changed by like they did in what we think is the real world, I guess. Right. Which is it's nice to see. And then it takes a little bit of time through the season where you're like, this is leading to something. Like, these people are not just
got off a plane and went their own separate ways. Like, they're coming back together into each other's lives and interacting with each other. And that's something that's always so fun through the whole show and it never feels forced, which is pretty incredible, that everybody is connected even before they get to the island. And Jack was a doctor for like someone so close to this person, and they were all on the outskirts of each other's lives, or even though they didn't like meet face to face, they were all crossing paths throughout time.
At some point they were like, crossing each other's paths or dipping into each other's lives and
affecting each other's lives at least. And now in this alternate reality or whatever it is, they're more aligned and actually connecting after the plane.
I've always loved that it kind of kicks off with Charlie. Like, I mean, I think everyone was super excited to see Charlie come back.
Yeah.
But I love that he's the one that kind of kicks off this whole, like, describing, like, love and describing this experience and kind of making it a mission to show each other something. And you're like, you start getting these, like, little flashes of events from the show, from the island, and you're like, well, wait a minute, how is this? And I loved how it was because of that kind of stuff that us as the fans started calling it the Flash Sideways, because there was no other way to describe what they were doing.
There's nowhere else to go. We've gone forward, we've gone backwards. This is something else.
But it was like a total fan thing that just kind of became, where people were like,
I feel like somebody said it and you're like, yeah, that sounds right. Let's all do that.
That's what it's officially known as, is the Flash Sideways. And I love that it's Charlie and Desmond that kind of, well, Charlie starts off this mission, and then Desmond, I love how Desmond is the one who is like, okay, I guess I'm the guy that's rounding everybody up.
The constant.
I love that so much, that his purpose in the show is so huge, and you don't get it until season 6 of like just how important he's actually been to the whole thing.
Well, he's the reason they all came together in the beginning, because he didn't push the button and crash their plane.
Right.
They're the reason. He's the reason they met, and so it's fitting that he's also the reason that they meet again.
Yeah, and it's just, I love season 6. I love season 6 so freaking much.
I feel like a lot of people, I've heard people say, I don't get it. Like, I don't get the ending of the show. And I feel like it's all there. It's like, all, it's even expressed in the conversation with Jack and Christian, his dad. Like, he pretty much comes out and tells him what's happening, and why it, and where we're at, and what it means. He's like, yeah, everything that happened on the island happened, and you're dead, and I'm dead, and everybody's dead. Everybody dies at some point, and this Flash Sideways is a place that you created so that you could all come together and move on to whatever is next, because this was the most important time in your lives.
Yeah, I love this. I love that it's so beautiful. Like, when you have such deep connections with people, I feel like this, I don't know, I don't want to sound new agey or whatever, but I love the concept of having this place, or being able to move on with the people that mean the most, or have had the deepest impact on your life. I like that idea. And I like that the show, for as much of like the debate of science versus faith that the show really presses, I like that the show never takes an actual side, except for, I guess, putting your faith in the people that matter the most in your life, or are the most impactful. Like, that's where, if anything else, focus on putting your faith in them and each other. I think that's a really cool thing. And it's hard for me to hear people say they don't get it, because Christian spells it out, but to me it's so obvious, especially after that first time seeing it. You just get it.
Mhm.
It's like, of course they're going to like have this place. They're going to be able to move on together because everything has to be together
Mhm.
regardless of circumstances. And I do like Christian's little thing of like, oh, some of these people went on to live super long, full lives after the island. Like, you did it, Jack.
Mhm.
You got people home. That's the point, is bringing people
Mhm.
home. Yeah, I love the ending so much. I love the battle between Jack and Ghost or Smoke Lock. I love the interactions with Jacob. One of my favorite parts of season 6 is the lighthouse episode, but
Yeah.
like afterwards, when Jack is just sitting and staring out at the ocean, and then Jacob shows up to talk with Hurley. I love Hurley's joke of like, "Oh, sure, now you show up. Like, he just broke your shit, dude." And he's like, "I know,
Yeah.
it's good." What I love about that is just that the contemplative Jack. I
Mhm.
think Matthew Fox does such a great job playing Jack in season. I mean, he's awesome throughout the series, but season 6 Jack is so good
Mhm.
because he's growing and he's letting go of so much, and he's
Yeah.
not doubting that, do I have what it takes? He's at a place of like just allowing what needs to happen, and if it's going to involve him, it's going to involve him. And I
Mhm.
also love that in his moment of contemplating, you can see it all over him. And I know Jacob actually kind of just comes out and says it, but I love that you just see him fully embrace and accept, like, there's bigger things than what I thought.
Yeah.
I think that's such a cool, and he plays it so well. It's just that quiet moment. I think everyone has had those quiet moments where you just have to sit and you're kind of forced to think and just be. And for a show where none of these characters are able to do that, to finally see Jack blatantly sit down and not do anything except stare out at the ocean, you're like, full circle right here. This is great. And it's funny because I remember when it was airing, by the time season 6 rolled around and they start talking about like the island has to have someone to protect it, to kind of watch over it, there has to be like this watcher. Everyone, I think, was like, well, Jack's gonna be the new Jacob. I mean, that's no surprise at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm.
I love that they only make him the new Jacob for like 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Just long enough.
Long enough to strip the power off of Smoke Lock, and then it's game on. I love that.
Yeah.
I really, really love
Yeah.
that.
And I think it's what's best for him as well. Like, it feels like they're kind of taking care of him, because if he had to be the leader or the protector of the island for centuries, however long it takes, I don't think he would do well with that responsibility.
No.
Just falling back into his own pressures that he's had to deal with and needing to fix everything and all that stuff. I think it's just not in his wheelhouse. Hurley is a much better, more, I guess, more practical, long-term solution for that.
Yeah. What I love most about Hurley being the island protector is it comes back down to that piece of positivity, the encouragement, that kind of innocence, even though Hurley has experienced some extreme trauma at this point, but just knowing like Hurley always has the best intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And so to know that the best intention, backed by his innocence and his purity, like, I think that is such a cool thing for Hurley to be the new leader. Now, let's face it, when Jack is making Hurley like him, and Hurley's like, well, dude, how are you going to come back? And Jack gives him that head shake. I think everyone was like, oh, we have to watch Jack die. Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, which is probably the hardest one overall, but it also, I mean, at least it comes with the success.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't sting as badly because he's not like taken from us, really. There's just a finality to it of he did it.
Yeah. Man, the final like couple shots, I love his the whole everyone gathering at the church. I love Hurley and Ben's interaction where Hurley says like, everyone's inside, dude. Come on. And Ben's telling him like, I think I have some stuff I still got to work on out here. It might be my favorite Ben moment because it's such a heavy dose of self-accountability. He's not denying himself like freedom or to be able to move on. He's putting himself in a position to learn how to forgive himself and to learn and grow from the mistakes and the things that he did instead of just getting away with it. Yeah. I think that's such a cool thing that the show does. And you know, obviously at the end that Ben is like completely redeemed. If Hurley tells him like, dude, you were a great number 2. I'm like, anytime Hurley calls someone dude on this show in a positive way, they're a winner. Like, they're good people. We stay with them. And I love that whole church interaction where you see like the reunion of most of the cast. And season 6 is full of so many beautiful moments of just reuniting and being together. And I love how the moment they all have their flashes of their memories with each other on the island and it brings them back together. None of them are stuck on all of the tough, nasty, bad, shit that they went through. It's like an immediate just joy that they're just together again. And it's like, that's such a cool thing for the show to culminate in. And that's why I think the finale is actually one of the best finales for a series. I know so many people complained about it and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
What a beautiful finale to culminate this whole show of being lost. And you're so stuck in the bad shit, the circumstances, all of this crap. So for the finale to be just pure unity and being found with each other, it's like, it's the perfect ending. It really is. I don't get why people don't like it.
Yeah, I think it does a great job of providing closure in a show where you thought it was never going to happen and it would be impossible to get enough closure just because so many questions were raised, so many threads were spun off through all the different people and characters, interactions and mysteries, that the show does bring everybody together and focuses on all the things that matter. Is it necessarily important who massacred all the Ajira people? Not really. Do people still wonder? Of course. But also for a show that had so many mysteries, I was looking through Lostpedia is a great resource, which is the Lost Encyclopedia, and they have a whole page dedicated to all the mysteries that have been raised, and shockingly few have been unsolved. There are a couple that are partly solved, and there's only a couple that are unsolved. Actually, one of the ones so my dad's a huge Lost fan, and probably has been all over the internet and watched all the behind the scenes stuff and just is a huge nut about it, which is awesome. And it's funny that he texted in that one of the things that he wants to know is why the creators won't talk about who was shooting at them in the outrigger chase.
Oh yeah,
because that's like one of the only fully unsolved questions that nobody knows and nobody on the show will talk about. And so that's one aching one, at least for my dad, that he wants to know the answer to. But in the most cases, I think everything was pretty much solved in a way that I think people weren't expecting, and that's probably why some people were unsatisfied with it. They wanted more of a, I don't know, maybe a clear cut, tie it in a bow, connect these strings, and but I feel like that would be feel too forced or too obvious or too whatever. This was very Lost-esque. It was very different and very maybe uncomfortable. Some people want to be like, is it heaven or not? Is it limbo or not? I want a label to put on it. And this is like, no, it's just a thing. It's just a place. And it's a place that they created so that they could all find each other and move on together. And that can be whatever you want it to be, or it can be nothing at all. It doesn't really matter. What matters is why it happened and what it means to those people.
Well, I also think a lot of people got so hung up on the island. So many people were hung up on the action, the mysteries, the weird shit that happens, all pertaining to the island.
Yeah.
But Lost was a show, and it's no surprise that you and I loved Lost so much, because I feel like one of our favorite filmmakers does this too, and you and I have talked about this, where they give you that surface with like the spectacle and the eye-catching stuff, right? Like, oh, here's the fun things. Lost was never about the island. Lost was never about just weird sci-fi stuff that happens. That stuff just happened. Lost was a human story. It's a drama about broken people finding redemption and being found. That's what the core purpose of this whole show was. And that's what the finale is. So I'm like, I've always thought like it's perfect. How, like, if you would have concluded Lost with only island things, I think it would have shortchanged the show, and that would have made it a terrible conclusion.
Yeah.
But to bring it completely, like, strip the island away and bring it completely to the people, that's what the show was. That's how it needed to end. And I never not cry when I watch Lost. It's
Yeah, I think the people and the characters and their journeys is the entire point of the show. That there's a lot of other very interesting stuff and a lot of very interesting story and history, but the characters are what really shine in the show, and I think why it holds up so much so many years later, 20 years later now. That's pretty incredible.
I love the show so much. It's just...
Yeah.
It's a powerful show. It really...
I'm really excited for the Getting Lost documentary to come out. I don't know if they have a date for that. The Indiegogo just ended, but it seems like they're almost done making it. And it seems like I've been following them on Instagram, and they have like every actor that appeared in the show, every crew member, fans of the show, famous fans of the show, just talking about the impact of it. And so that will be fun to go back with them as well.
That is, yeah, I think we need to follow when that's actually going to be out. And
yeah,
I would love to watch that, because I remember watching like all the fun things when the DVDs were coming out, when the show was airing, and just always being intrigued by it. And just like, there's so much to this show. It'd be amazing to actually see the full making of, and just talking about the impact, because it has had an impact. I mean, it really has. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, we could probably go on for a long time, even just talking about the effect on storytelling it's had since then, and what shows and movies and things have changed because of it. If you ever watch a Judd Apatow movie, you know how much it impacted him and his lives and the lives of his children.
Hey man, can I get my season 2 of Lost back? I have to know how it ends.
Yeah.
The final scene Jack's eye closing next to Vincent, man.
Yeah, it's just so. I mean, that cap, or I guess just the way that it ends the way it started, is also so perfect.
Yeah,
it's a really good ending for a really good show,
so good.
and I love it. I'll always love it. I feel like I'll always keep going back to it, kind of like you said, every couple of years.
I think it's a healthy one to go back to and revisit. I think there's so much that you can always unpack with it, and
yeah,
oh, it's so good. So, folks, if you
yeah, and I feel like every time I rewatch it, a different character is my favorite character that time.
Well, folks, if you haven't rewatched Lost for a little while, we highly recommend that you do. I would say try to find some physical copies, because if Netflix is pulling some shit and taking subplots out, or 18 minutes out of a 2 hour or an hour and a half finale, like that's wrong. So don't let the stream services do that. Just watch the physical copies. It's so much better, people. It's so much better.
Yeah. And then you'll have it forever.
So
yeah, I guess let us know your favorite moments, because everybody has a bunch, I'm sure. We want to celebrate the anniversary. We'll be posting a lot online about even more of our favorites as we remember them as well. Because even though we just watched them, there's so many to get into.
So many. But that would be like a 5-day episode if we really dove into every moment,
Maybe someday we'll have a separate Lost cast and we'll just do a show per episode. Man. Someday when this is our full-time job,
there you go.
People care enough to support us.
I like it. Yeah, tell us your experience with Lost, whether you're just discovering it recently or if you remember watching it weekly when it was airing, like old true TV was. And your favorite moments, or if you think Jake and I are just a little too connected to it. We'll tell you you're wrong, but
yeah, I'm curious if it doesn't connect to you, why that is, because it's unfathomable to me, but it doesn't personally matter to me. It's fine if it doesn't connect to you. I just really wonder what it is about it, because I'm sure it's not for everybody, but it seems like it could be.
I think, yeah, I'd be curious too. I'd probably question it a lot, but I'm curious, yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you. We love you. Make sure you join the fan page.
Yeah, and connect with us on Instagram, and mostly on Instagram during the hiatus, and look forward to the Joker deep dive in a couple of weeks, and ignore all of the times we reference what day it is and where we are in the movie draft and what episode comes next, because none of that is true.
None of it's true.
All of that already happened.
We've got our own Lost timeline going on right now, folks. So
yeah. And we'll be back in a month or two. We'll let you know on Instagram when
we'll keep you posted. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yep. Looking forward to it.
All right, guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.